The station was a wound in the sky, a festering ring of plasteel and neon orbiting a star that was slowly choking on its own blood. To the wealthy corporate elites living in the upper spires, Station Ouroboros was a jewel of commerce, a gateway to the outer rim where fortunes were made in ore processing and hyperlane logistics. To Jace, it was mostly just a smell. It smelled of recycled ozone, burnt wiring, and the distinct cloying sweetness of the alien fungal blooms that constantly clogged the air filtration units on the lower decks. Jace wiped a smear of hydraulic fluid from his forehead, leaving a grease streak that matched the gray fatigue of his skin. He was 32 years old but felt 50. His knees popped audibly as he stood up from the service hatch, his magnetic boots disengaging from the deck plating with a dull thud. 16 hours. He had been on shift for 16 hours. The corridor around him was bathed in the flickering, headache-inducing light of a malfunctioning holographic advertisement. A 20-foot-tall projection of a blue-skinned Asari pop star was selling a brand of zero-gravity soda, her smile glitching every 3 seconds into a rictus of digital static. Jace adjusted the strap of his heavy toolkit, his shoulder aching under the weight. "Hey, Jace." He turned to see Krell, a Vargas mechanic whose feline features were currently obscured by a welding mask. Krell lifted the mask, revealing yellow eyes with slit pupils and a snout covered in soot. "You look like you fell into the waste recycler and climbed back out," Krell said, his voice a gravelly rumble that vibrated in Jace's chest. "I feel like I am still in it," Jace replied, his voice raspy from breathing chemical fumes all day. "That makes 3 filtration units down in Sector 4. The slime mold is growing faster than we can scrape it." "You need help," Krell said, lighting a pungent herbal cigarette. "We all do. Company cut the budget again. 2 men doing the work of 5. I need a robot," Jace muttered, staring at the glitching soda advertisement. "I am serious. I need one of those old heavy lifter droids. Something that does not need sleep and does not complain when I tell it to scrub bio-waste out of a ventilation shaft." "Good luck," Krell snorted, blowing purple smoke toward the ceiling vents. "Even the scrap droids are going for 3,000 credits these days." "Inflation?" "I saw a listing," Jace said, patting the pocket of his stained coveralls where his cracked holoslate sat. "Surplus auction? Old domestic units. Nobody wants them because the servos are loud. I might bid. Don't buy junk. Jace, it is only junk if it does not work. If it can carry a toolbox, it is an upgrade." Jace gave a tired wave and shuffled toward the freight elevators. He just wanted to go home, eat a packet of rehydrated noodles and pass out for 6 hours before his comm unit beeped for the next shift. The corridor was crowded with the station's underclass, high-lottle dock workers with their gills fluttering in the dry air, human miners with dust permanently etched into their pores, and skittering insectoid scavengers selling illicit data chips from trench coats. Jace pressed the call button for the elevator. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, harder. A minute later, the heavy doors groaned open, revealing a rust bucket cage that looked like it had not been serviced since the station was built. He stepped inside, the metal grating clanging under his boots. He punched the button for level 88, the bowels of the station where the rent was cheap and the gravity generators occasionally failed. As the elevator lurched downward with a stomach-churning drop, Jace pulled out his hollow slate. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks, and the battery indicator was flashing red, but it still connected to the local mesh network. He navigated to the local salvage auction site with clumsy, grease-stained thumbs. Scavenger's paradise. Daily liquidation. He scrolled past crates of expired protein paste and a box of left-footed gravity boots until he found it. Lot 479, Class C Companion Unit, clearance, condition, used, refurbished. Starting bid, 500 credits, Companion Unit. That was marketing speak for a domestic servant droid. Usually, they were bipedal, humanoid-shaped chassis covered in cheap synthetic skin, programmed for housekeeping, cooking, and basic heavy lifting. Class C meant it was old tech, probably clunky, definitely lacking the advanced conversational AI of the newer models. Perfect, Jace muttered to the empty elevator. I do not need conversation. I need someone to carry the heavy hydro spanner. The current bid was 550 credits. He had 600 credits saved up in his rainy day fund. It was reckless. It was stupid. But his back was screaming in agony, and the thought of hauling that toolkit again tomorrow made him want to weep. He tapped the screen to enter a bid of 560. The elevator shuddered violently. It was a common occurrence. The magnetic rails were misaligned, causing the carriage to slam sideways whenever it passed the heavy industrial sectors. Jace's thumb slipped. Instead of 560, the laggy interface registered a double tap on the increment button just as the connection froze. Processing. The screen read, a spinning hourglass mocking him. No, Jace said, tapping the cancel button. No, cancel, cancel. The elevator slammed sideways again, knocking Jace's shoulder into the wall. The slate slipped from his hand, clattering onto the metal grate floor. He scrambled to pick it up, cursing vividly. Connection restored. He looked at the screen. His stomach dropped faster than the elevator. Your bid, 2,000 credits. 2,000. That was his entire savings. That was his rent for 4 months. That was his ticket off this station eventually. Cancel, he yelled at the screen, stabbing the withdraw button. Error. Auction ending in 3 seconds. No. 2. Come on, you piece of junk. 1. Sold. The word flashed in cheerful green letters that seemed to burn into his retinas. Congratulations, you have won Lot 472. Jace slumped against the elevator wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He stared at the screen, his mouth open. 2,000 credits gone, just like that. He had just spent his life savings on a glorified vacuum cleaner. He groaned, burying his face in his hands. He was going to have to eat synthesized algae paste for the next year. He was going to have to fix the servo motor on the droid himself to make it worth that kind of money. Maybe he could resell it if he polished it up. Maybe he could get 2,000 back. The elevator chimed, signaling his arrival at level 88, but another notification pinged on his slate. Transfer initiated. Item location, Docking Bay 4. Pickup required immediately for biological assets. Jace frowned. He wiped the screen with his thumb, smearing more grease over the text. Biological assets. He reread the listing. Class C Companion Unit. Wait. He tapped the Details tab, which he had ignored in his haste. The text was small, buried under the technical specs. Subtype, Organic Sentient. Status, Indentured Contract Transfer. Species, Unknown. Exotic. Jace felt the blood drain from his face. He stood up, the elevator doors opening onto his dingy home corridor. But he did not step out. He hammered the Contact Seller button. Biological? He whispered. I did not buy a droid. I bought a... He could not even say the word. Slavery was illegal in the core worlds, technically, but out here in the Rim, the laws were porous. They called it indentured companionship. It was a loophole the size of a dreadnought. You did not buy the person. You bought their debt contract. But the effect was the same. You owned their time, their labor, and their life until the debt was paid. And the debts were usually calculated to be unpayable. The seller was not responding. The credits had already been deducted from his account. Jace slammed his hand against the elevator control panel, reversing the direction. He had to go to the docking bay. He had to fix this. He was a janitor, not a slaver. Docking Bay 4 was a cavernous hangar filled with the screech of metal on metal and the shouting of cargo loaders. It was colder here, the atmospheric shielding thin enough that the chill of the void seeped through the hull. Jace ran past stacks of crates, his breath pluming in the air. He found the reclamation desk, a rusted booth manned by two bored-looking station officials wearing the blue and gray uniforms of the Port Authority. One was a human with a thick neck and a thicker mustache. The other was a reptilian Rhodian picking its teeth with a vibro knife. "I made a mistake," Jace gasped, slamming his slate onto the counter. "The auction. Lot 472. I need a refund." The human official barely looked up from his own screen. "No refunds on auction items. Pal, read the terms of service." "It was a glitch," Jace argued, his voice rising in panic. "I thought I was bidding on a droid, a cleaning droid. It said Class C companion." "Yeah, that is the classification," the Rhodian hissed, its tongue flicking out. "Class C, domestic and personal service, organic." "I do not want a person," Jace shouted. The human official finally looked at him, sneering. He looked Jace up and down, the stained coveralls, the grease in his hair, the desperation. "Look, buddy," the official said, "we do not judge. Some guys like the metal ones. Some guys like the squishy ones. You paid the credits. You own the contract. Now take your shipment. We are clearing the floor for a freighter coming in from the mining guild. I am not taking it. You take it, or we ejected it out the airlock as unclaimed biomass," the Rhodian said casually. "Station regulation. No loitering assets." Jace froze. "Eject it?" The human official pointed a thumb over his shoulder. "Here it comes now." A heavy lift cart rumbled toward them, pushed by a drone. On the cart sat a stasis pod. It was a sleek, coffin-sized cylinder made of brushed chrome and reinforced glass, frosted over with condensation. The drone stopped the cart in front of Jace. "Sign here," the official said, sliding a digital pad across the counter. Jace stared at the pod. He could not see inside through the frost. It looked expensive. It looked ominous. "If I sign this," Jace said, his voice trembling, "I can return the contract to the registry, set it free?" The official laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "Sure, you can cancel the contract, but the registry charges a termination fee, about 50,000 credits. Or you can just open the door and let it run. But without a master, station security will pick it up as a vagrant and resell it within the hour." Jace felt sick. He looked at the pod, then at the officials. They were enjoying this. They thought he was some pervert scavenger who had saved up his pennies to buy a girl. He grabbed the stylus and scribbled his signature, pressing so hard the screen distorted. "Fine," he spat. "Payment accepted. Asset released. Good luck with it. I heard the exotic ones are biting hazards." The official hit a button on his console. The stasis pod hissed. Jets of white nitrogen vapor vented from the seams, swirling around Jace's legs. The locking mechanisms disengaged with a series of heavy thuds. The glass lid hummed and slowly began to rise. Jace took a step back, gripping his hydro spanner instinctively, as if a wild animal were about to leap out. He expected a brute, maybe a strong-backed laborer species, something with muscles and tusks that he could at least talk to. Maybe work out a deal where they split the janitorial shifts. The vapor cleared. Jace blinked. Inside the pod, curled into a fetal position on the padded lining, was a girl. She was tiny. That was the first thing that hit him. She looked like she weighed less than a bag of rivets. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin was a pale, pearlescent lavender that seemed to shimmer in the harsh hangar lights, catching the reflection of the overhead strip lamps like the inside of a seashell. She was wearing a gown made of some thin, silvery material that looked far too formal and far too flimsy for a space station. It left her arms and shoulders bare, revealing skin that looked impossibly soft. She stirred, inhaling a sharp, gasping breath as the stasis drugs wore off. Jace stood frozen. He felt like a giant, dirty intruder standing over a piece of fine art that had been dropped in a junkyard. Her eyes snapped open. They were huge, dominating her delicate face. No whites, no pupils, just swirling pools of opal and violet, shifting like storm clouds on a gas giant. She sat up, her movements fluid and fast, too fast for a human. She looked around wildly, at the smirking officials, at the looming industrial ceiling, and finally, she locked eyes with Jace. Jace braced himself. He expected screaming. He expected her to recoil in horror at the sight of him, a grease-covered human mechanic with dark circles under his eyes and a tool belt dragging down his hips. Instead, her face transformed. A look of absolute blinding radiance broke across her features. It was a smile so genuine, so filled with relief and joy that it physically stunned him. She scrambled out of the pod, her bare feet hitting the cold metal deck. She did not run away. She launched herself at him. "Whoa!" Jace yelled, dropping his hands to catch her before she slammed into him. She impacted his chest with surprising force, her arms wrapping around his waist, burying her face in his stained coveralls. She was trembling, but not from cold. "You chose me," she said. Her voice was melodic, musical, but her grasp of standard was accented, halting. You actually chose me." Jace stood there, arms hovering awkwardly in the air, terrified to touch her. She felt fragile, yet the grip she had on his jacket was iron tight. "Hey," he stammered, looking at the clerks. The clerks were howling with laughter now. "Look at that," the Rhodian cackled. "Love at first sight. She knows a sucker when she sees one," the human official added. Jace looked down at the alien girl. She pulled back slightly to look up at him, her opalescent eyes swimming with tears. "I was so afraid," she whispered, her hands clutching his lapels. "The others, the ones who looked at me before, they had so many teeth. They looked hungry. But you..." She reached up, a small, four-fingered hand trembling as she touched the rough stubble on Jace's jaw. "You are just a man," she said, as if it were the highest compliment in the universe. "You are sad and tired, but you are not a monster. Thank you. Thank you for buying me." Jace felt a hot flush of shame crawl up his neck. The words twisted in his gut like a knife. "Thank you for buying me." It was the most horrific thing he had ever heard. "Miss..." "Listen," Jace said, gently trying to pry her hands off him. "There has been a mistake. I did not mean to..." "Please!" she shrieked, the joy instantly vanishing, replaced by a terror so raw it silenced the laughing clerks. "Please do not send me back." She clung harder, her nails digging into the fabric of his suit. "If you send me back to the registry, they will put me in the cycle again," she babbled, the words tumbling out. "The senator's men, they are watching the lists. Please, I will be good. I will do anything. I eat very little. I take up no space. Please keep me." Jace looked at the officials. The human shrugged. "No returns, remember? You walk out with her, or we call security to scrape her off you and throw her in the holding cells." Jace looked down at her. She was shaking violently now, pressing herself against him as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. He saw the desperation in her eyes. It was the same look he saw in the mirror sometimes, only 1,000 times worse. She was terrified for her life. He let out a long, ragged breath. He closed his eyes for a second, cursing the universe, cursing the elevator, and cursing his own soft heart. "Fine," Jace said, his voice rough. "Fine. You are coming with me." The girl let out a sob of relief and buried her face in his chest again. "Let's go," Jace muttered, putting a protective arm awkwardly around her shoulders to shield her from the leering gaze of the clerks. He walked her out of the cargo bay, leaving his dignity and his life savings behind. The journey to the residential sector was a nightmare of social anxiety. Jace tried to walk fast, keeping his head down, but it was impossible to be inconspicuous with a glowing silver-gowned alien beauty clinging to his arm. Dock workers whistled. A group of mercenaries stopped cleaning their weapons to stare. Jace noticed that the girl, he could not keep calling her the girl in his head, flinched every time someone got too close. She moved with a strange grace, flowing like water, but she stayed in his shadow, using his bulk as a shield. "What is your name?" Jace asked quietly as they waited for a transport tram. She looked up, startled that he had spoken to her. "In the registry, I was lot 472. She said, "No, your real name." She hesitated, glancing around as if checking for listeners. "Leary," she whispered. "My name is Leary." "Leary," Jace repeated. It sounded like a chime. "Okay, Leary, I am Jace." "Jace." She tested the word, smiling again. It was that same blinding smile. "Jace. Owner Jace." "Stop," Jace hissed, looking around frantically to see if anyone heard. "Do not call me that. Never call me that." Her smile faltered, confusion clouding her eyes, but the contract. "Screw the contract," Jace said. "Look, we are going to my place. It is not much. It is actually terrible. But once we are inside, we are going to set some ground rules. And rule number 1 is that I do not own you." Leary tilted her head, her opal eyes swirling. "I do not understand." "You paid the credits." "I made a mistake," Jace said. "I thought you were a robot." "A robot?" She blinked. "Like a machine?" "Yes." "To help me carry tools." Leary looked down at her slender arms, then at Jace's heavy toolkit slung over his other shoulder. She reached out and tried to lift the strap. She strained, her face turning a darker shade of lavender, but the heavy metal box barely budged. I can get stronger," she promised breathlessly, refusing to let go. "I will carry it. I will carry everything." "Stop, stop," Jace sighed, gently moving her hand away. "You are missing the point. Just, let's get inside." They arrived at level 88. The corridor smelled of boiled cabbage and old coolant. Jace led her to door 88B, fumbling with his keycard. The lock mechanism sparked, as it always did, before sliding open. "Welcome to the penthouse," Jace muttered, stepping aside. The apartment was a box. It was perhaps 4 meters by 4 meters. One wall was dominated by a viewport that looked out not at the stars, but at the flashing red light of a communication buoy. The other wall was a kitchenette that consisted of a heating coil and a water dispenser. The floor was covered in piles of spare parts, dirty laundry, and empty noodle cartons. A narrow cot was shoved into the corner. Jace kicked a pile of hydraulic hoses under a table. "Sorry about the mess. I was not expecting company." "Obviously." Leary stepped inside as if entering a temple. She looked at the peeling paint on the ceiling, the flickering light strip, the mountain of junk. "It is safe here?" she asked, turning to him. "Yeah," Jace said, locking the door and engaging the deadbolt. "It is safe. Nobody comes down here unless they are lost or looking for trouble." Leary let out a sigh that seemed to deflate her entire body. She wandered over to the cot and sat down on the edge of the gray wool blanket. She ran her hand over the fabric. Fascinated. "It is soft," she murmured. "It is military surplus scratch wool," Jace corrected. "It is the opposite of soft." He rubbed his face with his hands, the exhaustion finally crashing down on him. He had 2,000 credits of debt, a tiny apartment, and an alien aristocrat sitting on his bed. "Okay," Jace said, leaning against the doorframe because there was nowhere else to stand. "Listen to me. Leary, you can stay here. I am not going to throw you out, but you are not my property. I am not going to ask you to do anything. You are a guest, okay? We will figure out how to get your contract nullified, or how to get you home." Leary watched him with intense curiosity. She sat cross-legged on the bed, her gown pooling around her like liquid mercury. "You are a very strange human." "Jace," she said softly. "Yeah. Well, I accidentally purchased an alien companion." Jace laughed, a dry, hysterical sound, and the tiny alien girl was overjoyed. "That is how my week is going." He pushed off the wall. "You take the bed," he said. "I will sleep on the floor. I have got some foam pads from a packing crate." "It is fine." "No," Leary protested, moving to stand up. "The floor is for the servant. Sit down," Jace ordered. She sat immediately, conditioned obedience warring with her confusion. "I am used to the floor," Jace lied. He grabbed a bundle of packing foam from the corner and spread it out near the kitchenette. He threw his jacket over it as a pillow. He dimmed the lights. The apartment plunged into shadow, lit only by the rhythmic red pulse of the buoy outside the viewport. "Go to sleep, Leary," Jace said, lying down and staring at the ceiling. "We will deal with reality in the morning. Thank you." "Jace," her voice came from the darkness, small and pure. Jace closed his eyes, listening to the hum of the station's life support. He drifted into an uneasy sleep, his dreams filled with auction counters and laughing clerks. On the bed, Leary did not sleep immediately. She watched the rise and fall of the human's chest. She felt the vibration of the station around her, the thrum of the reactor cores miles below, the whisper of data streams flowing through the conduits in the walls. She closed her eyes, and as her breathing slowed, a reaction began. Faint, intricate lines of bioluminescence ignited on her skin. They started at her collarbone and traced delicate, glowing geometric patterns down her arms and across her face. They pulsed in perfect synchronization, not with her heartbeat, but with the encrypted carrier signal that was silently pinging every subnet on Station Ouroboros. The station was calling out, and for the first time in centuries, someone was answering. The smell of lemon-scented industrial solvent was the first thing to hit Jace's nose, sharp enough to cut through the lingering headache of a sleepless night. He groaned, rolling over on the hard packing foam he had spread on the floor. His back popped in 3 places, a familiar morning symphony of stiff joints and regret. For a moment, suspended in the gray haze of waking, he forgot. He thought he was just waking up for another double shift at the maintenance bay, alone in his box of an apartment. Then he heard the humming. It was not a human sound. It was a low, oscillating resonance, like the sound of a wet finger tracing the rim of a crystal glass. But deeper. It seemed to vibrate inside the metal floor plates, conducting through the foam pad and into his bones. Jace opened his eyes. Leary was moving through his apartment like a whirlwind of silver silk and violet skin. She had found his supply of cleaning chemicals, the heavy-duty stuff he used to scrub hydraulic grease off his work boots, and was currently scrubbing the wall near the viewport. She moved with a terrifying, manic energy, her small hands blurring as she polished a patch of riveted steel until it gleamed like a mirror. She paused, dipped a rag into the bucket, and resumed scrubbing, the humming sound rising and falling with her movements. "Leary?" Jace croaked, sitting up and rubbing his face. She froze. The humming stopped instantly. She spun around, eyes wide, dropping the rag. "Owner Jace," she gasped. "You are awake. I am sorry. I did not mean to disturb your rest cycle. I was trying to optimize the habitat." Jace blinked, looking around. His apartment, usually a disaster zone of discarded parts and dirty laundry, had been transformed. His spare engine parts were stacked in a perfect pyramid in the corner. His dirty coveralls were folded into a precise square on the only chair. The floor, usually sticky with spilled coolant, was dry and smelled of lemons. "You cleaned," Jace said, his voice thick with sleep. "I prepared the space," Leary corrected, wringing her hands. "A clean habitat increases efficiency. I found the solvent. It smells aggressive, but effective." She gestured to the bucket. It was filled with a bright blue liquid. Jace squinted at it. "That is the solvent?" "Yes, did you dilute it?" Leary tilted her head, her opal eyes confused. "Dilute? No. I tasted it to check the potency, but it burned the throat, so I decided it was for surfaces only." Jace scrambled to his feet, kicking the foam pad aside. "You drank it?" he shouted, rushing over to her. "That is industrial degreaser. It can strip paint off a hull." "Only a small sip," Leary squeaked, backing away, terrified by his sudden movement. "To test. It is very spicy." "Spicy?" Jace grabbed her face, tilting her chin up to look into her mouth. Her breath smelled like chemical lemons. Her tongue looked fine, though slightly bluer than he imagined was normal. "You cannot just drink things you find in bottles. Leary, that has a skull and crossbones on the label. That means death." "I thought it was a clan symbol," she whispered, trembling under his touch. Jace let go of her face, running a hand through his messy hair. He felt his heart hammering. She was an alien species he knew nothing about. For all he knew, lemon-scented ammonia was a delicacy, or a neurotoxin that would kill her in an hour. "Do you feel sick?" he asked urgently. "No," she said. "My biology filters toxins efficiently. The previous handlers. They fed us nutrient paste that was mostly gray water." "I am strong." Jace let out a long exhale, his shoulders slumping. Okay. Rule number 2. Do not eat or drink anything unless I give it to you. Deal?" "I accept the terms," she said instantly, standing at attention. She reached down and picked up a pair of his socks from the neat pile on the floor. They were gray, woolen, and had holes in the heels. She held them up with both hands as if presenting a holy relic. "I also inspected your foot bindings," she said solemnly. "The fabric is compromised. Is this a ritual damage? To show humility before the floor gods?" Jace stared at her. "Foot bindings? They are socks, Leary. And the holes are there because I cannot afford new ones, not because I am praying to the floor." "Oh," she breathed, her eyes widening with sympathy. "Poverty. I understand. A lack of resources decreases survival probability." She turned and picked up his heavy red toolbox, lifting it with a strain that made the tendons in her neck stand out. She placed it on the small table. "And this," she said, stroking the battered metal lid. "This is your ritual weapons chest. I polished the latches." Jace walked over and opened the box. Inside, his hydro spanner, laser cutter, and torque wrench lay in their slots. They were indeed gleaming. "These are tools, Leary, not weapons." She looked at the laser cutter. "That produces a focused thermal beam capable of severing flesh, yes?" "Well, yeah, if you are careless, but then it is a weapon," she said firmly. You are a warrior of the maintenance caste. It is honorable. Jace looked at her serious, luminous face. She was trying so hard to categorize his sad, gritty life into something epic, something that made sense to her. He felt a laugh bubbling up in his chest, but it was a sad laugh. Sure, Jace said, closing the box. I am a warrior of the maintenance caste. My enemy is rust, and I am losing the war. He turned to the kitchenette. I need coffee. Do you drink coffee? Or is caffeine considered a biological weapon on your planet? I will ingest whatever you require me to ingest, she said, clasping her hands behind her back. Jace froze. The humor evaporated instantly. He turned back to face her. The early morning light from the red star outside was filtering through the viewport, casting a bloody glow over the room. But Leary stood in the shadows, waiting for orders. He walked over to the cot where he had made her sleep and patted the mattress. Sit down. Leary. She sat immediately, back straight, eyes fixed on him. Jace pulled the single chair over and sat facing her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He looked at her, really looked at her. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, ethereal and delicate. But beneath that, he saw the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers dug into the fabric of her gown. She was terrified. Leary, Jace said softly, we need to talk about the serving thing. I am not cleaning fast enough, she asked, her voice hitching. I can be faster. I just need to learn the layout. No, Jace said. You are cleaning fine. Too good, actually. That is not the point. You do not have to serve me. You are not obligated to do anything. Leary stared at him, her brow furrowed. But you bought the contract. I told you that was an accident. It does not matter if it was an accident, she insisted, her voice rising in panic. The transaction is logged. You are the holder. If I am not useful to the holder, then the holder has made a bad investment. And bad investments are liquidated. She said the word liquidated with a chilling familiarity. I am not going to liquidate you, Jace said firmly. I am going to keep you safe until we figure this out. You can just be here. You can look out the window. You can sleep. You can read my hollow books. You do not have to earn your air. Leary shook her head slowly. That is not how it works. That is never how it works. She reached up and pulled the collar of her silver gown down, exposing the back of her neck and shoulder. Jace recoiled. There, marred against the shimmering perfection of her lavender skin, was a patch of scar tissue. It was ugly, knotted, and angry, a burn mark in the shape of a hexagonal grid. It looked like someone had pressed a branding iron into her flesh and held it there. The control collar, Leary whispered, tracing the scar with a finger. The first handler. He said I was too opinionated. He said I asked too many questions. So he put the collar on the high setting. It corrects behavior. She looked up at Jace, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. Companions who argue get corrected. Jace, companions who are useless get discarded. I do not want to be corrected again. Please, let me be useful. Jace felt a wave of nausea roll through him. It was followed by a flash of anger so hot it made his hands shake. He looked at his own rough, grease-stained hands. He had paid 2,000 credits into the system that did this to her. Even by accident, he had funded the people who held the branding iron. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair back. He paced to the window, staring out at the grim industrial sprawl of the station. Cover it up, he said, his voice tight. Leary pulled her gown up quickly, shrinking back against the wall. I am sorry. I did not mean to offend your sight. You did not offend me, Jace said, turning back to her. His voice was fierce. I am angry at them. Not you, never you. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He walked back to the table and picked up his cracked hollow slate. I need to know what we are dealing with, he muttered. He sat down on the floor, leaning against the wall, and began to tap at the screen. Leary watched him from the bed, her body still tense, waiting for the blow that had not come. Jace navigated to the station's public information node. He typed in Companion Registry Legal Code. The text that scrolled across the screen was dense, filled with corporate jargon and sanitized language. Voluntary biological companionship is a cornerstone of interspecies cultural exchange. The registry ensures the safety and placement of all assets. Contract holders assume full liability for the well-being and productivity of the companion. It was all lies. Jace knew how to read between the lines of corporate speak. Productivity meant labor, placement meant sale. And then he found the subsection on runaway reclamation. Any biological asset found outside the direct supervision of the contract holder is subject to immediate seizure by station security or authorized corporate recovery agents. Bounty hunters are authorized to use non-lethal force to secure assets. Non-lethal force, Jace scoffed, like branding irons. He looked up. Leary had moved off the bed. She was sitting on the floor a few feet away from him, watching his face. She moved closer, hesitantly, like a stray cat testing the perimeter. "Why are you looking at the laws?" she asked softly. "Because I need to know how to keep them from taking you back," Jace said, not looking up from the screen. Leary reached out and touched his hand, the one holding the slate. Her fingers were cool, her skin smooth as glass. Jace stopped typing. He looked at her hand covering his. His knuckles were scarred and stained with oil that never quite washed out. Her hand was perfect, glowing faintly. "You apologize," she said. It was a statement, not a question. "What?" "You say sorry," she said. "When you bump into me, when you shout, you say sorry." "Yeah, well, it is polite," Jace muttered. "My previous owners, the ones who bid on me, they did not apologize and they did not speak to me. They spoke about me, like I was a piece of furniture." She looked into his eyes, her gaze intense and searching. "You have sad eyes, Jace, but they are kind, and your hands." She traced a callus on his thumb. "They are rough. You work, you build things, you fix things. You are not like the ones in the soft robes who only destroy." Jace felt a lump in his throat. He gently pulled his hand away, not because he wanted to, but because the intensity of her gratitude was overwhelming. "I am just a janitor. Leary. I fix toilets and air filters. There is nothing noble about it." "It is noble to me," she said. Jace sighed, setting the slate down. "Tell me about where you came from." "Not the auction block. Before that." Leary pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around her legs. Her bioluminescence dimmed slightly, turning a soft, melancholic blue. "My world is called Lyria," she said quietly. "It is mostly ocean, but not like the water in your reclamation tanks. It is warm. The water glows. At night, the waves are like liquid fire. We live on the archipelagos. We sing to the tides." She closed her eyes, rocking slightly. "My people. We are not many. We are sensitive. We feel the currents of energy, the planetary magnetic fields. We use it to navigate, to build." "Why are you here?" Jace asked gently. "How did a girl from a glowing ocean end up in a crate on Station Ouroboros?" "They call us the Lyrian," she said, opening her eyes. "But the traders call us Keys." "Keys?" She tapped her chest. Our genetics, our biosignature is unique. It can interface with old systems, pre-collapse technology, the ruling families of my world. We carry the strongest signatures. She looked at Jace, fear creeping back into her expression. I was not a runaway. I was a diplomatic escort. I was traveling with my aunt to the Galactic Senate to petition for protection. Our ship was boarded. Mercenaries. They killed the guards. They took me. She shivered. They did not know who I was exactly. They just knew I was Lyrian. But the traffickers, they realized if they sold me as a royal heir, the wars for me would be too big, too much attention. So they forged papers. They labeled me a Class C companion, hidden in plain sight, a bargain bin item. Jace stared at her. The complexity of it staggered him. She was not just a victim of slavery, she was a political prisoner hidden in a catalog of household appliances. So you are a princess? Jace asked, half joking but fully horrified. I am a carrier of the bloodline, she said simply. If the wrong people find out I am here. If they realize I am not just a companion. She did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. Jace rubbed his temples. Okay. So we have bounty hunters looking for a runaway slave, and potentially galactic superpowers looking for a lost princess. And I am armed with a wrench. Great odds. Suddenly, the overhead speaker in the hallway crackled. Attention Sector 88. Routine atmospheric cycling in progress. Please secure all loose. The voice distorted. It dragged down into a deep bass rumble, then pitched up into a screech. Jace looked at the wall-mounted info screen near the door. The image of the station logo flickered. The standard blue and white circle dissolved, rearranging itself into a complex geometric mandala of swirling lines. Jace froze. He looked at Lyri. The glowing pattern on her arms was pulsing. It matched the pattern on the screen perfectly. Lyri gasped, her hand going to her forehead. My head, she whispered. It is... Loud. She stumbled, reaching out to brace herself against the metal wall of the apartment. As soon as her palm made contact with the bulkhead, the reaction was instantaneous. A ripple of white light exploded from beneath her hand, racing through the metal of the wall like a pulse of electricity. It shot up to the ceiling, causing the light strip to flare brighter than it ever had before. The info screen scrambled, the text turning into a waterfall of alien code that poured down the display. Lyri! Jace shouted, jumping up and grabbing her shoulders to pull her away from the wall. She came away easily, collapsing into his arms. The light in the wall faded, but the info screen remained glitching, scrolling meaningless data. I heard it, she gasped, clutching Jace's shirt. The station. It sang to me. It recognized me. Jace looked from her to the wall. The metal looked normal again, but he had seen it. The station had reacted to her touch like a living thing waking up. You are plugged in, Jace whispered. You said your people interface with old systems. This station? Parts of it are hundreds of years old. The core infrastructure. Lyri looked up at him, her eyes wide and frightened. It hurts. Jace, it is too much data. It wants a command. We need to get you out of here, Jace said, adrenaline spiking in his blood. If you are tripping the electrical grid just by touching the wall, someone is going to notice. The power spikes will be logged. He grabbed his jacket. Come on. Where are we going? Somewhere with insulation. And food. You need to eat. The maintenance trams on the lower levels were not built for comfort. They were rattling metal cages designed to haul crates of ore and tired workers between sectors. Jace and Lyri stood in the back corner of a crowded car as it hurtled through the vacuum tube connecting Sector 88 to the market district. The tram was packed with miners coming off shift, smelling of sweat and sulfur. Jace had made Leary pull the hood of his spare jacket up over her head to hide her glowing skin and alien features. But she still drew attention. She was too small, too graceful, and she stood too close to him. Because the tram was packed, they were pressed together. Jace stood with his back to the corner, shielding her with his body. Leary stood in front of him, her hands resting on his chest for balance as the tram swayed and jerked. She was staring at him again. Under the shadow of the hood, her eyes were luminous, tracking every micro-expression on his face. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Jace whispered, trying to ignore the fact that her body was pressed against his, surprisingly warm and solid. "I am studying human stress responses," she whispered back. "Your heart is beating very fast." "Yeah. Well, we are smuggling a fugitive on public transit," Jace muttered. "That tends to elevate the heart rate." She leaned in closer. She was so short she had to tilt her head back to look him in the eye. She lifted one hand and, before he could stop her, touched his cheek. Her fingers were cool against his flushed skin. She traced the line of his jaw, her touch feather-light. "You are red," she noted. "The blood is rising to the surface. Is this fear? Or the other thing?" Jace felt his face go even hotter. He caught her wrist, gently pulling her hand away. "Leary, you cannot just climb into someone's personal space like that, not in public." "Why?" she asked, not pulling her hand back from his grip. "Because—" "Boundaries," Jace said, his voice cracking slightly. "Humans have a bubble. You are inside the bubble." She looked at their joined hands. She stepped half an inch closer, testing the limit. "Is this allowed?" she asked softly. The tram lurched around a corner, throwing her against him. Jace's arm instinctively went around her waist to steady her. She felt fragile, like a bird. But the way she looked at him was heavy, filled with a terrifying amount of trust. Jace looked down at her. He knew he should push her away. He knew he should maintain the distance of a reluctant guardian. But he didn't. He liked the weight of her against him. He liked the way she smelled, like ozone and rain. "Yeah," Jace breathed, his voice barely audible over the screech of the tram rails. "It is allowed, but only if you want it," he added quickly, remembering his promise. "You do not do it because you think I want it. You do it because you want it." Leary paused. She seemed to consider this, searching her own feelings. Then, slowly, she threaded her fingers through his, interlocking them. "I want it," she whispered. "It makes the noise in my head quieter." She rested her forehead against his chest, right over his heart. Jace stood there, holding the hand of an alien princess in a car full of miners, and felt a strange, terrifying protectiveness harden around his heart. He would punch the next person who looked at her wrong. He would take a wrench to the entire universe if he had to. High above in the corporate spires, far removed from the smell of the lower decks, a red light began to blink on a console. It was a silent alarm, routed through a secure encrypted channel that bypassed the standard station security grid. A figure sat in a darkened room, illuminated only by the glow of the monitors. The room smelled of expensive synthetic leather and filtered air. The figure wore the matte black uniform of corporate security, Division of Asset Reclamation. The agent leaned forward, tapping a command into the interface. "Alert. Genetic match detected. Sector 88. Match probability, 99.8%. Identity, Lyrian Royal Line. Subject, unregistered." The agent smiled, a cold, professional expression. "Got you," he murmured. He opened a communication channel, The recipient was not the station commander, but a private frequency linked directly to the office of Senator Vrax. "Sir," the agent said into the comms, "we have a ping. The lost asset has surfaced. She is in the lower levels. It appears she has been acquired by a local laborer." A voice came back, smooth and dangerous. "Secure her quietly. I do not want the registry involved. If she is who we think she is worth more than this entire station." "Understood," the agent said. "And the laborer? Eliminate him. He has seen too much." The agent closed the channel. He typed a command into the surveillance grid, overriding the privacy locks on the lower deck cameras. Back in the apartment, night had fallen, or what passed for night on the station. The artificial lights had dimmed to a low amber simulation of dusk. Jace was asleep on the foam pad, exhausted by the day's stress. He was snoring softly, one arm thrown over his eyes. Lyrie stood by the viewport. She was not sleeping. The hum of the station was louder at night, a constant song of energy and information that tugged at her mind. She placed her hand on the glass, looking out at the dying red star. She felt the station's pain, the failing filters, the rusted joints, the corrupted code. It was a dying beast, just like the star it orbited. She did not see the drone. It was a small black sphere, silent and hovering on anti-grav thrusters just outside the thick glass of the viewport. It blended perfectly with the darkness of space. A single red optical sensor dilated, focusing through the glass. It scanned the room, bypassing the dirt and the clutter, and locked onto the heat signature of the small figure in the silver gown. Target confirmed. The drone's internal logic processor registered. It zoomed in, capturing the bioluminescent patterns on her skin, transmitting the image back to the dark room in the spire. Lyrie shivered, a sudden chill running down her spine. She pulled her arms around herself, feeling a phantom sensation of being watched. She turned to look at Jace, sleeping peacefully on the floor. She stepped away from the window, moving to sit beside him, seeking the anchor of his presence. Outside, the drone hovered for a moment longer, then rose silently into the darkness, carrying the coordinates of their destruction. The station had teeth, and today, they were bared. Jace felt it the moment he clocked in. The air in the maintenance tunnels usually smelled of stale coffee and ozone, but today it carried the sharp, electric tang of ozone from overcharged capacitors, the smell of active security grids. He kept his head down, gripping his toolbox like a lifeline, but the back of his neck prickled. There were too many drones. Usually, the maintenance sectors were a blind spot, a place where cameras were covered in grime and sensors had been burned out for years. But today, shiny black orbs hovered at every intersection, their red optical eyes sweeping the corridors with mechanical precision. "ID scan required," a metallic voice barked as Jace tried to pass through the blast door to Sector 4. Jace froze. He had walked through this door every day for 6 years. It had never asked for a scan. He swallowed the lump of panic rising in his throat and held up his wrist, processing. The drone hummed, a laser grid washing over his skin. Subject, Jace Varon. Clearance, Level 7 maintenance. Pulse rate elevated. Pupil dilation suspicious. "I drank too much caffeine," Jace muttered, trying to keep his voice steady. "And I am late for a sewage overflow. You want to delay me. You can explain the smell to the deck commander." The drone hesitated, its logic processors weighing the security risk against the bureaucratic nightmare of a sewage leak. "Proceed." It finally clicked, the blast door hissing open. Jace walked through, forcing himself not to run. His legs felt like lead. They were looking for something. They were looking for her. Every shadow looked like an agent, Every flicker of a light strip felt like a trap closing. He had left Leary locked in his apartment with strictly rationed food packs and a promise that he would be back in 10 hours. But every minute away from her felt like a gamble with lethal odds. Leary was not in the apartment. Technically, she was currently wedged into the ventilation shaft 3 feet above the kitchenette. Her knees pulled to her chest, her silver eyes closed in deep concentration. The apartment was too small, too silent. It made her thoughts loud. But up here, in the metal arteries of the station, she could hear the song. To a human, Station Ouroboros was a collection of metal and plastic. To Leary, it was a living, dying organism of energy. She could feel the pulse of the main reactor miles below, a deep, thrumming bass note that shook her bones. She could hear the high-pitched, frantic staccato of the data streams rushing through the fiber-optic cables in the walls, carrying trillions of credits in transactions, secrets, and lies. She extended her hand, pressing her palm against the cool galvanized steel of the duct. The station was in pain. She felt the blocked filters like a congestion in a lung. She felt the rusted joints like arthritic aches. But beneath the decay, there was a melody she recognized. It was the same command code she had felt in the wall yesterday, a sleeping giant waiting for a voice to wake it up. She hummed a low note, matching the frequency of the power conduit running parallel to the vent. The lights in the corridor outside flickered in time with her breath. She smiled in the darkness. She was not helpless. She was listening, and she was learning the layout of her cage. Jace returned 6 hours later, his nerves frayed to the breaking point. He had dodged 3 random checkpoints and had to hide in a garbage chute for 20 minutes to avoid a patrol of armored corporate troopers. He keyed the lock on his door, praying it would open. It sparked and slid aside. "Leary," he called out softly, stepping into the dim room. Silence. The bed was empty. The chair was empty. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. "Leary!" He dropped his toolbox, the heavy metal clanging against the floor, and began to rip his jacket off, his breath coming in short gasps. If they had taken her. If he had left her alone and they had taken her. He was halfway through pulling his grease-stained undershirt over his head, standing there bare-chested and sweating, when the ceiling vent above him gave a treacherous squeal. Jace looked up just as the grate gave way. With a yelp of surprise, Leary tumbled out of the ceiling. She landed squarely on top of him. Jace shouted, his legs tangling in his half-removed shirt, and they went down in a heap of limbs and silver fabric. "Oof!" Jace groaned, hitting the floor hard with Leary sprawled across his chest. "I am undamaged," Leary announced quickly, scrambling to her knees. She froze, realizing exactly where she was. Her hands were resting on his bare shoulders. Her face was inches from his. Jace lay there, wheezing, staring up at her. Her hair was a mess of static, and she had a smudge of dust on her nose. "Did you?" Jace wheezed. "Did you just fall out of my ceiling?" "I was inspecting the structural integrity," Leary said, her face turning a vivid, luminescent violet. "The fasteners are suboptimal." She looked down. Her gaze traveled over his bare chest, the scars from welding burns, the definition of muscle earned from years of hauling heavy machinery. Her eyes went wide. Jace realized he was naked from the waist up. He scrambled backward, crab-walking across the floor until he hit the bed, grabbing his shirt and clutching it to his chest like a shield. "Do not look," he sputtered. Leary immediately covered her eyes with both hands. "I am not looking." Jace frantically pulled the shirt back on, getting his head stuck in the armhole for a humiliated second before popping free. "Okay," he panted, smoothing the fabric down. Okay, I am decent. He looked at her. Leary still had her hands over her eyes, but her fingers were spread just wide enough that one large opalescent eye was clearly peeking through the gap. She was staring at him with blatant fascination. Leary, Jace said, pointing a finger at her. I can see you looking. I am checking for injuries. She lied, her voice squeaking. You have very different skin texture than the diagrams. She lowered her hands, a grin tugging at the corner of her mouth. The tension in the room, the fear of the patrols, the terror of the day, snapped, replaced by a sudden, absurd hilarity. You fell on me, Jace chuckled, rubbing his bruised ribs. You are supposed to be a graceful alien princess, and you fell out of a vent like a possum. A possum is a warrior animal, Leary asked hopefully. Sure, Jace laughed, the sound rusty but real. A warrior animal that eats trash and screams. Just like me. Leary laughed then, a sound like wind chimes in a storm, and for a moment, the oppressive weight of the station vanished. The laughter died an hour later when the power cut. It was not a flicker, it was a hard kill. The hum of the ventilation died. The lights vanished, plunging the windowless apartment into a darkness so absolute it felt heavy. Jace froze, his hand going instinctively to the vibro knife he kept in his boot. Stay still, he whispered. He heard Leary moving in the dark, a soft rustle of fabric, and then he felt her. She did not stay still. She moved toward him, unerringly finding him in the pitch black. She curled up next to him where he sat against the wall, pulling her knees to her chest and pressing her side against his. She was shivering. Is it them? She whispered. Maybe, Jace said, keeping his voice low. Or just a brownout. The grid is old. He felt her take a deep breath, and then she did something that made his breath hitch. She shifted, sliding her arm through his and pressing her ear directly against his chest, right over his heart. What are you doing? Jace breathed, his heart hammering against her cheek. Listening, she murmured. In the dark, the rhythm is the only truth. She tightened her grip on his arm. On Lyria. We live in the deep oceans where no light reaches, she said softly. To share a heartbeat. To let another hear your life rhythm. It is the deepest trust. It means you are safe. It means you are not alone in the black. Jace felt the warmth of her against him, the fragile weight of her trust. He wanted to wrap his arms around her and never let go. He wanted to promise her that he would always be there. But he couldn't. Leary, he said, his voice rough. Us. You know I am just a guy, right? I bought a contract by mistake. You did not buy me, she corrected, her voice fierce against his ribs. You saved me. I stumbled into it, Jace insisted. And I do not want to own you. I need you to know that when we get out of here, if we get out of here, you go where you want. You do not owe me a debt. You do not owe me this. He gestured vaguely in the dark, indicating their closeness. I want you to be safe, Leary. But more than that, I want you to choose. There was a silence, broken only by the sound of their synchronized breathing. Leary lifted her head. In the total darkness, he could not see her, but he felt her breath on his chin. I know what a cage feels like. Jace, I know what duty feels like. This is neither. She buried her face in his neck, her small fingers bunching the fabric of his shirt, anchoring herself to him as if he were the only solid thing in a drifting universe. I choose this, she whispered. I choose you, for now, and for as long as we are in the dark. Jace closed his eyes, his hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. He felt a fierce, terrifying love take root in his chest. a vine growing through concrete. "Okay," he whispered into her hair. "Okay." The tender silence shattered with the sound of a blowtorch. Sparks erupted from the center of the door lock, illuminating the room in violent, flashing orange light. "Asset located." A digitized voice roared from the hallway. "Breach and secure." Jace moved on instinct. He grabbed Leary, hauling her to her feet. "Vent!" he shouted, shoving her toward the counter where she had climbed down earlier. "Go!" The door exploded inward. Two armored figures stormed in, their helmets glowing with tactical HUDs. They held stun batons that crackled with blue lightning. "Subject Jace Varen, surrender the asset!" Jace grabbed his heavy toolbox and hurled it with all his strength. It slammed into the lead trooper's helmet with a sickening crunch, knocking him backward into his partner. "Move!" "Leary!" Jace screamed. She scrambled up the counter and into the open vent, turning back to reach for him. Jace vaulted off the bed, grabbing her hands, and hauled himself up just as a stun bolt sizzled into the wall where his head had been a second before. They scrambled through the narrow metal tunnel, the sounds of heavy boots clanging below them. "They are in the infrastructure," the trooper shouted over the comms. "Seal the sector." Jace crawled on his hands and knees, dragging Leary behind him. "We have to get to the maintenance shaft. It drops down to the reactor levels. They will not follow us there without rad suits." They reached a vertical junction. Jace kicked the grate out, and they tumbled onto a narrow service catwalk suspended over a yawning chasm of machinery. Below them, the station's guts churned, massive pistons, spinning turbines, and the distant, angry glow of the reactor core. Above them, a blast door began to slide shut, cutting off their path forward. "It is locking down!" Jace yelled, looking at the heavy steel slab descending rapidly. Leary grabbed the railing. Her eyes flared with white light. "No," she said. She reached out, not touching the door, but touching the control panel on the wall. The bioluminescent lines on her skin blazed, visible even through her sleeves. "Open," she commanded. The station groaned. The blast door shuddered, halted, and then reversed, grinding upward with a screech of protesting metal. The lights on the catwalk exploded, showering sparks, and the security cameras mounted on the walls suddenly spun around and pointed at the ceiling. Jace stared at her. She was panting, sweat beading on her forehead, but she looked fierce. "I scrambled their sensors," she gasped. "They cannot see us. You hacked the door with your hand?" I asked it nicely. She said, stumbling. Jace caught her. She was draining her own bioenergy to do it. "Come on," he said, pulling her arm over his shoulder. "Keep moving." They ran along the gantry, the metal vibrating under their boots. They were halfway across the reactor bay when a buzzing sound cut through the roar of the machinery. A drone dropped from the shadows above. This was not a scanner drone. This was a hunter-seeker. It was armed with a stun cannon and a capture net. It hovered directly in their path, its red eye fixing on Leary. "Halt," the drone broadcasted. "Surrender or be neutralized." Jace shoved Leary behind him, raising his vibro knife. It was a pathetic weapon against a combat drone. "Jace, no!" Leary cried. The drone's cannon whined as it charged. Leary pushed past Jace. She did not run away. She ran at the drone. "Leary!" She leaped, her silver gown fluttering, and slapped her palm flat against the drone's optical lens. "Connect!" She screamed. A shockwave of blue light erupted from her hand. The drone seized. Its thrusters misfired violently. The red eye turned white, then shattered. System critical, unauthorized override. The drone dropped like a stone, plummeting into the abyss of the reactor shaft. It vanished into the red glow below, followed by a muffled explosion. Leary landed on the grating, her knees buckling. Jace rushed to her, scooping her up. She was trembling violently, her glowing lines dim and flickering. "You killed it," Jace whispered, looking at her hands. "I overloaded its logic gate," she murmured, her voice slurring. "It was loud." Jace looked at her, really looked at her. She was terrified, exhausted, and small. But she had just taken down a military-grade hunter with a touch. "You are not just a princess," he said, fear cold in his stomach. "You are a master key, a walking weapon." "I am a key," she corrected weakly. "Keys open things. Sometimes. Sometimes things break when you open them too fast." Jace held her tight. He realized then that keeping her safe was not just about hiding her. It was about keeping the wrong people from using her to burn the galaxy down. They descended into the underlevels, the lawless roots of the station where the air scrubbers rarely worked and the only law was credit. Jace led them to a rusted bulkhead door hidden behind a pile of salvage crates. He banged on it. 3 hits, a pause, 2 hits. The viewing slot slid open, a cybernetic eye word, focusing on them. "Jace," the voice was gravel and smoke. "You look like hell, and you smell like ozone. Open up." "Rax," Jace said. "I need the favor. Now." The bolts threw back and the door swung open. Rax was a heavy-set human with a cybernetic jaw and a collection of illegal firearms strapped to his chest. He ran a smuggling ring that moved everything from rare spices to stolen engine parts. He ushered them into his cluttered warehouse, kicking a crate shut. "You have a lot of heat on you, kid," Rax grunted, locking the door. "Station Net is screaming about a rogue biological asset." He looked at Leary, who was huddled in Jace's oversized jacket, shivering. "Is that it?" Rax laughed, a harsh metallic sound. "All this fuss for a companion? You fall in love with a toaster." "Jace? She is not a toaster," Jace snapped. "She is in trouble. We need a transport off station, a freighter going to the rim." Rax lit a cigar, leaning against a stack of contraband. "That is expensive and dangerous. Why should I stick my neck out for a runaway pleasure bot?" "Because you owe me," Jace said. "I fixed your life support when you were suffocating in your own recycled air. You owe me a life." Rax grunted, conceding the point. He pulled out a handheld scanner. "Fine. Let me scan her. If she is tagged with a high-level tracker, she is not getting on my ship." "No scans," Jace said, stepping in front of her. "Relax. Jace, just checking for hardware." Rax raised the scanner before Jace could stop him. The beam washed over Leary. The scanner beeped, then it beeped again, faster. The screen flashed red. Rax's cigar fell out of his mouth. He looked at the scanner, then at Leary, his face draining of color. "Class C," he whispered. "You have got to be kidding me." "What?" Jace demanded. Rax walked over to a terminal and plugged the scanner in. He brought up a file, a black market database. "Look at this," Rax said, pointing at the screen. "This is a Lyrian biosignature. See that helix pattern? That is not standard genetic code. That is an encryption key." He tapped a few keys, bringing up a rotatable model of the galaxy. These people, the Lyrian royal line, they are not just rare. They are the living administrators of the old pre-collapse network. Their DNA can override planetary governance AIs. They can rewrite the shipping lanes. They can crash the banking sector. Rax looked at Jace, his eyes wide. They labeled her Class C to hide her. If the registry knew what she was, they would not sell her. They would dissect her, or put her on a throne and use her to rule the sector. Leary stood up, her hood falling back. Her face was pale, her expression shifting from fear to a cold, hard anger. "I knew I was valuable," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "But I did not know I was. They hunt me not because I am beautiful, but because I am a tool. She looked at the screen, at the lines of code that represented her life. They made me a slave to keep me from being a queen. Rax let out a low whistle. Kid, you are holding a grenade with the pin pulled. Jace looked at Leary. We have to go. We have to disappear. We will find an uninhabited rock in the outer rim. We will hide. No, Leary said. The word hung in the air. Jace turned to her. What? No, she repeated, stronger this time. I am not running away to hide in a hole. She pointed at the terminal. My blood can override the registry. It can command the AI. Theoretically, Rax muttered, if you can get to a core node, then I can free them, Leary said. Not just me, all of them. Every companion on this station. Every slave sold under a false contract. I can crash the system. Leary, that is suicide, Jace pleaded, grabbing her shoulders. The companion core is in the Senator's private hub. It is a fortress. I do not care, she shouted, pulling away from him. Her bioluminescence flared bright, blinding in the dim warehouse. Do you think I can live freely knowing my sisters are in cages, knowing I have the key in my blood and I did nothing? I care, Jace shouted back. I care if you die. I cannot watch you die. Leary! Why? She demanded, stepping close to him, her eyes blazing. Why does it matter, Jace? You bought a mistake. Let the mistake fix the machine because I love you. The words tore out of his throat, raw and unplanned. The warehouse went silent. Rax awkwardly pretended to calibrate his weapon. Jace stood there, chest heaving. I love you, he said again, quieter. I am terrified. Leary. I have been a nobody my whole life. I fix broken things. I cannot fix this if you are dead. I want to run because I want a life with you, not a martyrdom. Leary's glow softened. She reached up, her hands trembling, and cupped his face. Jace, she whispered, you want me to be safe, but I need to be free, and I cannot be free if I am running. She looked deep into his eyes. Help me. Stand with me. Not as my owner, as my partner. Jace looked at her, this tiny, terrifying, magnificent creature who had fallen from the stars into his miserable life. He knew she was right. He knew he could not stop her. He let out a ragged breath. Surrendering. Okay, he said. We fight. Leary let out a sob and surged forward, kissing him. It was not a polite, tentative kiss. It was a collision. It was desperate and messy and tasted of salt and ozone. Jace's hands found her waist, pulling her flush against him, lifting her off the ground. She wrapped her legs around him, burying her hands in his hair. It was a boundary crossed, a contract burned. In the flickering light of a smuggler's den, they claimed each other. Behind them, Rax watched, his expression unreadable. He looked at the couple, then down at his data pad. A message was blinking on the screen. Bounty alert. Lyrian asset. Reward. 10,000 credits. 10 million. Enough to buy a moon. Enough to buy a new conscience. Rax sighed. He liked Jace. He really did. But business was business. He tapped the transmit button. Coordinates sent. 5 minutes later, the roof blew off. There was no warning. A sonic charge detonated the warehouse ceiling, raining debris down on them. Jace threw himself over Leary, shielding her as concrete dust choked the air. Rax! Jace yelled, coughing. We are under attack! Rax did not answer. He was standing by the back exit, his weapon holstered. He looked at Jace with sad, cold eyes. Sorry, kid, Rax said over the roar of approaching engines. Inflation is a killer. Troopers in matte black stealth armor rappelled down through the hole in the roof. They did not fire stunners. They fired containment nets, heavy, weighted meshes that crackled with energy dampeners. Jace scrambled for his knife, but a sonic pulse slammed him into the wall, shattering his hearing. He slumped to the floor, vision swimming. He watched, helpless, as the retrieval team swarmed Leary. She screamed, her light flaring once, brilliant and blinding, before a dampener collar was snapped around her neck. Her light died instantly, her skin turning a dull gray lavender. Jace! She croaked, reaching for him as they dragged her away. Jace tried to crawl toward her, his limbs refusing to obey. Rax walked out the back door without looking back. The last thing Jace saw before the darkness took him was Leary's eyes, wide and terrified, staring at him as she was hauled into the belly of a black dropship. The shockwave hit the warehouse like a physical hammer, shattering the air itself. Jace was thrown backward, his body slamming into a stack of rusted shipping containers. His vision swam in a haze of gray dust and ringing silence. He tasted blood in his mouth, metallic and sharp. He tried to scramble up, his boots sliding on the debris-strewn floor. But a second pulse, a sonic dampener, drove him back down to his knees. Through the choking dust, he saw her. Leary was not on the ground. She was suspended in midair, caught in the grip of a containment field that hummed with a sick, yellow energy. It was a suppression cage, the kind used to transport volatile plasma beasts or high-risk prisoners. She was screaming, but no sound came out. The field swallowed her voice. Her luminous skin, usually a kaleidoscope of pearl and violet, was dull and gray, the bioluminescent patterns flickering weakly like a dying strobe light. She beat her small fists against the energy barrier, her eyes wide with a terror that cut straight through the chaos to Jace's heart. The retrieval team did not look like station security. They were elite corporate contractors clad in matte white armor that seemed to absorb the dim light of the warehouse. They moved with the silent, terrifying efficiency of machines. One of them, a towering figure with a commander's crest on his helmet, walked toward the containment field, checking readings on a wrist-mounted console. "Secure the asset," the commander's voice boomed, amplified by his helmet speakers. "Prepare for transport to the upper spire." Jace's hand went to his belt. His vibro knife was gone, lost in the blast. He had a wrench in his pocket. Against armored stormtroopers and a sonic cannon, he might as well have been holding a spoon. He looked at Leary. She had stopped fighting the field. She was looking at him. Her eyes were searching for him through the haze, desperate for a savior, for the partner who had promised to stand with her. If he fought, they would kill him. That was a mathematical certainty. And if he died, she would be alone in a shark tank with no one to watch her back. A cold, hard realization settled in Jace's gut. It was heavier than the debris, sharper than the shrapnel. To save her, he had to break her heart. He stood up. He raised his hands high above his head, dropping the wrench. It clattered loudly on the concrete. "Don't shoot!" Jace shouted, his voice cracking with a perfect, pathetic fear. "I surrender. I am not with them." "I am not." The commander turned, his helmet tilting slightly as he assessed the dirty, disheveled human standing among the ruins. "Identify," the commander barked. "I am just the buyer," Jace yelled, stumbling forward, making sure to look as cowardly as possible. "Jace Varen, maintenance level 7. Look, I didn't know she was... whatever she is, I just bought a contract." Jace saw Leary flinch, inside the yellow field. Her mouth shaped his name. She looked confused, her head tilting to the side, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to pull a plasma grenade and be the hero. "I don't want any trouble with the senator," Jace babbled, walking toward the troops with his hands shaking visibly. "You can have her. Take her. I just want to live. I'm just a janitor. I never signed up for treason." The commander laughed, a dry, metallic sound. "A wise choice, citizen." Leary's face crumbled. The confusion vanished. replaced by a dawn of absolute horror. She pressed her hands against the energy barrier, staring at him. "Jace," she mouthed. "No. I'll sign whatever you want," Jace continued, forcing himself not to look at her. He looked at the commander's console instead. "Transfer of ownership. Right now. Just let me walk away. She's too much trouble anyway. Broken merchandise. Broken merchandise." The words hung in the air, toxic and cruel. Jace felt a piece of his soul wither and die, but he kept his face a mask of terrified self-preservation. "Bring the data pad," the commander ordered a subordinate. "Let the rat sign off. It saves us the legal paperwork of a seizure." A trooper stepped forward, holding out a sleek black slate. Jace lowered his hands, wiping sweat and blood onto his coveralls. He stepped closer to the commander, who was standing right next to Leary's floating cage. Jace took the stylus. His hand was trembling, but not from fear. It was from the sheer effort of not vomiting. He looked up, just for a second. He couldn't help it. Leary was weeping. Her tears were not like human tears. They were thick and glowing, sliding down her gray cheeks like drops of liquid mercury. She wasn't angry. She looked devastated, hollowed out. "I chose you," she whispered. The containment field dampened the sound, but Jace heard it. He read it on her lips. He felt it in the marrow of his bones. He gritted his teeth, looked down at the pad, and scribbled his signature as he handed the pad back to the commander. Jace stumbled. He pretended to trip over a piece of rubble, his shoulder colliding hard with the commander's arm, the arm holding the primary command console. "Watch it, trash!" The commander shoved him back. Sorry, clumsy feet," Jace stammered, backing away. He kept his left hand clenched tight in a fist at his side. Inside his palm, cold and sharp, was a data shard. He had ripped it from the port on the commander's gauntlet during the collision. It was a 1-in-a-million move, a pickpocket trick he had learned from the street kids on level 88. Executed with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Done," the commander said, checking his wrist. "Assets secured. Ownership reverted to the state. Move out." The troopers turned. The anti-grav generators on the containment cage whined, and Leary began to float away, towed behind them like a balloon. She did not look back. She slumped against the energy field, her knees drawn to her chest, her face hidden in her hands. The glow of her skin had faded almost completely, leaving her looking small and gray and lifeless. Jace stood in the ruin of the warehouse, watching the love of his life being dragged into the darkness. He stood there until the whine of the engines faded, until the dust settled, until he was the only living thing left in the wreckage. Only then did he unclench his fist. The data shard sat in his palm, glittering like a diamond. He let out a scream of rage, kicking a metal crate so hard it dented. He fell to his knees, gasping for air, the image of Leary's tear-streaked face burning into his retinas. "I am coming for you," he whispered to the silence. "Hold on. Leary, just hold on." He stood up, wiping the blood from his mouth. He wasn't Jace the janitor anymore. He was a man with the keys to the kingdom, and he was going to burn it down. Jace turned and marched back toward the rear of the warehouse, to the blast-proof office where Rax had retreated. The door was locked. Jace didn't knock. He pulled a laser cutter from his belt, his ritual weapon, and sliced through the locking mechanism in 3 seconds. He kicked the door open. Rax was stuffing credit chips into a duffel bag. The smuggler looked up, startled, his hand going for the blaster on his hip. "Don't," Jace said. His voice was dead calm. Rax hesitated, then let his hand drop. He looked at Jace, then at the empty warehouse behind him. "You are alive," Rax grunted. "I figured they would liquidate you as a loose end." "I surrendered," Jace said, walking into the room. I played the coward, Rax shrugged, zipping up the bag. Smart. There is no profit in being a dead hero. Kid, I told you, 10 million credits. That is enough to buy a private moon. I did you a favor, really. She was going to get you killed. You owe me a life. Rax, Jace said, stepping closer. Remember? The oxygen scrubbers on your freighter. You were choking to death and I fixed them for free. You said you owed me. I just saved your life by not shooting you myself, Rax countered, though he took a step back. We are even... No, Jace said. He slammed the data shard onto the desk. I swiped this from the commander. It is their encryption key. It has the coordinates to the Senator's private hub. It has the access codes to the companion core. Rax stared at the shard, his cybernetic eye whirring. You picked a corporate commander's pocket? You have a death wish. I need a crew, Jace said. Rax laughed. A crew? For what? To storm the Senator's palace? You are a janitor. Jace, you unclogged toilets. I need the rebels. Jace cut him off. The ones you complain about. The ones who buy your spare power cells to build bombs. I know you trade with them. Rax stopped laughing. He looked at Jace, really looked at him. He saw the blood on his teeth, the dark, dangerous set of his jaw. This wasn't the tired mechanic who fixed air filters. This was something else. They are crazy, Rax warned. They live in the subsewers. They eat rats. They think the station is a prison. It is a prison, Jace said. Give me the contact. Rax looked at his bag of money, then at Jace. He sighed, rubbing his flesh and blood temple. Sector 0, Rax muttered. The old thermal venting shafts. Ask for Mara. Tell her you are the guy who stole the Senator's house keys. Thank you, Jace said, turning to leave. Jace, Rax called out. Jace paused at the door. If you pull this off, if you actually crash the system. Yeah? Burn my debt record while you are at it. Jace didn't smile. He just walked out into the shadows. The transition from the lower decks to the Senator's private spire was like moving from a sewer to a jewelry box. Leary watched the world pass through the haze of the containment field. They had moved her to a high-speed lift, shooting upward through the station's spine. The gray metal of the industrial levels gave way to white marble, gold inlays, and cascading vertical gardens. She felt numb. The betrayal sat in her chest like a stone, heavy and cold. Broken merchandise. That was what he had called her. She had believed him. She had believed that a human could look past the price tag. She had been a fool. He was just a man, and men were survivors. The lift slowed. The doors slid open with a musical chime. They were in a private docking bay that smelled of jasmine and rare orchids. The floor was polished obsidian. Waiting for them was a retinue of servants, not robots, but biological attendants in silk livery. Their heads bowed low. At the center of the room stood Senator Vrax. He was a Talizora, a tall, slender species with pale blue skin and an elongated cranium. He wore robes of iridescent white fabric that seemed to float around him. He was beautiful, in a terrifying, sculpted way. Ah, the senator smiled, spreading his arms. The lost jewel returns. The commander deactivated the hover function of the cage, setting it gently on the floor. He tapped a code, and the yellow field dissolved. Leary slumped forward, catching herself on her hands and knees. Without the dampener, her connection to the station rushed back in, a headache of data and energy, but she was too weak to use it. Stand, my dear, Vrax said, his voice like poured honey. Leary slowly pushed herself up. She stood barefoot on the obsidian floor, her silver gown torn and dirty from the warehouse floor. She lifted her chin, her violet eyes burning with a hatred that should have incinerated him. My name is Leary of the House of Ethelgard, she said, her voice shaking but clear. I am a diplomatic envoy. You are violating galactic law. Vrax chuckled, walking a slow circle around her. Galactic law is a flexible thing, your radiance, especially when one holds the pen that writes it. He stopped in front of her, reaching out a long, slender finger to tilt her chin up. She flinched, but he held her fast. I know who you are, Little Key, the last drop of the royal blood, the only living being who can speak the language of the ancients. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of spices. Do you have any idea how much power is wasted in this galaxy? Systems fighting systems, AIs conflicting with biologicals. Chaos, the companion registry. It is a crude tool. It controls labor, but with you, with your blood merged into the central processor. He smiled, a razor-thin expression. I can control desire. I can control loyalty. I can rewrite the definition of obedience for every sentient being in the core worlds. You want to make me a filter, Leary whispered, horror dawning on her. You want to process the galaxy's mind through my brain. I want to bring order, Vrax corrected, and you will help me. I will die first, Larry spat. Vrax sighed, wiping a speck of dust from his robe. I expected resistance, so let me clarify the stakes. He gestured to the air. A holographic sphere appeared, displaying thousands of red dots scattered across the galaxy. These are registered companions, millions of them. Currently, they are linked to the network for location tracking and contract management. He tapped the air. The dots pulsed. If you refuse to interface, if you fight the integration, I will introduce a feedback loop into the network, a neural spike. It will not kill them, but it will cause pain, agonizing, unending pain, for every single one of them. Leary gasped, her hand going to her mouth. You would torture millions. Just to break me? I would simply be adjusting the settings, Vrax said coldly. The choice is yours, your radiance. Sit on the throne and serve, and they sleep peacefully. Fight me, and they scream. He turned and walked away, his robes flowing behind him. Prepare her for the ceremony. I want the integration complete within the hour. Servants swarmed her, their hands soft but their grips firm. They led her away toward a set of massive golden doors. Leary walked with them, her legs moving automatically. She felt hollowed out. Jace was gone. Her freedom was gone. And now, her resistance was being held hostage against the suffering of millions. She was alone. You chose me, she thought, the memory of Jace's voice echoing in her mind. You are not my property. Why did he say that if he was going to sell her? Why did he hold her in the dark? She remembered his hands, rough, scarred, gentle. She remembered the way he had looked at the commander, the way he had stumbled. Clumsy feet. Jace was never clumsy. He was a mechanic. He worked in 0G. He moved with precision. Leary paused, causing the servants to bump into her. He had stumbled. He had collided with the commander, a tiny spark of hope, fragile as a candle flame in a hurricane, flickered in her chest. He didn't sell me, she realized, her breath catching. He played them. He was coming for her. The despair that had been crushing her chest evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He was doing his part. He was on the outside. She had to do hers. She looked at the golden doors of the interface chamber. Vrax wanted a key. Fine. She would give him one. She would open his precious system, and then she would break it into a million pieces. I am ready, Leary said to the servants, her voice suddenly steady. Take me to the interface. Sector 0 was not on any map. It was a labyrinth of decommissioned thermal exhaust tunnels beneath the station's waste processing levels. It was hot, dark, and smelled of sulfur. Jace crawled through a narrow pipe, the heat searing through his coveralls. He emerged into a cavernous, spherical chamber lit by makeshift glow lamps. 3 weapons were instantly pointed at his head. "Hold it!" a voice echoed. Jace stood up slowly, raising his hands. This was becoming a habit. "I am looking for Mara," he said. A woman stepped out from the shadows. She was human, short and muscular, with a shaved head and tattoos of circuit diagrams running down her neck. She held a heavy plasma rifle with the ease of someone who slept with it. "You are the janitor," she said, sounding unimpressed. "Rax said you were coming, said you have a gift for us." Jace reached into his pocket and pulled out the data shard. He tossed it to her. "Coordinates to the Senator's private hub, security codes, patrol rotations, and the direct access frequency for the companion core." Mara caught the shard. She slotted it into a wrist computer and scanned it. Her eyes widened. "This is real," she muttered. This is the whole layout." She looked up at Jace, a new respect in her gaze. "Why bring this to us? You could sell this to the Black Sun Syndicate for a fortune." "I don't want money," Jace said. "I want a team." Mara crossed her arms. "We are not mercenaries, janitor. We are freedom fighters. We don't do rescue missions for lost girlfriends." "It is not just a rescue mission," Jace said, stepping forward. "The Senator is trying to merge a Lyrian royal into the registry. He wants to control the whole network. If he succeeds, he won't just own slaves, he'll own the government." The rebels behind her murmured uneasily. "But," Jace continued, his voice rising, "if we get in there, if we get her to the terminal, she can invert it. She can crash the registry. All of it. Every contract canceled. Every caller dead." Mara stared at him. "You are talking about a revolution. I am talking about breaking the machine," Jace said. "Are you in, or are you just going to hide in the sewer and talk about it?" Mara grinned. It was a sharp, dangerous grin. "Boys," she called out to her team, "load up. We are going to the penthouse." The plan was madness. Jace knew that. They were in a maintenance conduit that ran parallel to the main reactor coolant feed. It was dangerously radioactive, shielded only by a few inches of lead lining. Mara was in front, cutting through a bulkhead with a plasma torch. Jace was behind her, checking the schematics on his slate. "We have 5 minutes," Jace said over the comms. "The station does a power cycling reroute at 0400. The sensors in the Senator's spire will blink for 10 seconds while they switch to backup generators. That is our window." 10 seconds to breach a blast door?" one of the rebels grumbled. "That is tight." "I can override the lock in 3, Jace said. "It is a K7 mechanism. I used to fix them. They have a sticky tumbler on the 3rd pin." "You better be right." "Janitor," Mara said, sparks flying from her torch. Jace adjusted his grip on the heavy pulse rifle Mara had given him. It felt alien in his hands. He was used to creating, repairing, maintaining. Now he was here to destroy. He closed his eyes for a second. He thought of Lyri. He thought of the way she had looked at him in the darkness of his apartment, her small hand pressing against his chest to feel his heartbeat. He thought of the kiss in the smuggler's den, the desperate, electric taste of her. "You're my equal," he thought, rehearsing the words he would say to her. "You are my choice, not my purchase, my choice." "Breach in 3, Mara shouted. Jace opened his eyes. The fear was gone. There was only the objective. 2, 1. The bulkhead fell inward with a crash. "Go, go, go!" The interface chamber was a cathedral of light. Walls of transparent crystal rose 50 feet high, pulsing with streams of blue data. In the center of the room, atop a raised dais, sat the throne. It was not a chair for sitting. It was a cradle of fiber optic cables and neural needles. Leary sat in it. Her silver gown had been replaced by a ceremonial robe of white light weave. Her arms were strapped to the armrests, her head held in place by a halo of crystalline sensors. Senator Vrax stood before her, checking the readout on a floating podium. Integration at 40%, he noted with satisfaction. Your biorhythm is syncing perfectly. Your radiance. Leary did not answer. She couldn't. The machine was inside her head. It felt like drowning in cold water. Millions of voices, millions of data streams, millions of contracts were flooding into her mind. She saw names, prices, locations. She felt the dull, throbbing ache of a million control collars. It was overwhelming. It wanted to crush her ego, to smooth her out into a simple processor. Submit, the machine whispered. Process. Leary gritted her teeth, tears leaking from her eyes. She focused on a single image, a messy apartment, a pile of gray socks, a man with grease on his face who said sorry. No, she thought. I am not a processor. I am a key. She reached out with her mind, diving into the digital torrent. She didn't fight the current. She wrote it. She found the central command directory, the root of the registry. It was guarded by firewalls of complex logic. Vrax watched the screen, pulse rate increasing. He muttered, "She is struggling. Good. Break her down." He didn't see the tiny, subtle shift in the data stream. Leary wasn't struggling to resist. She was struggling to hide what she was doing. She found the ownership variable. It was a simple binary flag. 0 for free, 1 for owned. She began to weave a new command around it, a command that would flip the bit. But she needed more power. She needed a distraction. Suddenly, a tremor went through the floor. An alarm blared in the distance. Security breach. Sector 4 maintenance conduit. Vrax looked up, frowning. Rebels? Here? On the dais? Leary's eyes snapped open. They were glowing with a terrifying intensity. She sensed him, not through the cameras, but through the station itself. She felt the familiar, frantic rhythm of Jace's heartbeat moving through the walls. He was close. He was coming through the conduit, but there were automated defenses in that hallway. Turrets. Leary gasped, the pain of the interface spiking. She pushed back against the machine. She grabbed a bundle of data representing the hallway security grid and twisted it. In the corridor outside the senator's sanctum, Jace and the rebels were pinned down. Turrets dropped from the ceiling, their barrels spinning up. "Take cover!" Mara screamed, diving behind a marble pillar. Jace froze. He was in the open. The turret swiveled toward him, the targeting laser painting a red dot on his chest. He flinched, waiting for the end, the turret whirred. Then, it twitched. The red light turned green. Friendly detected. The turret chimed. It swiveled away from Jace and pointed back up the hallway, toward the approaching corporate guards. "What the hell?" Mara shouted, looking at Jace. "It's her!" Jace breathed, a grin breaking across his face. "She knows we are here." He scrambled to his feet, racking the slide of his rifle. She opened the door. Push. The rebels surged forward, Jace in the lead, inside the chamber. Vrax stared at his console. "Why are the external defenses deactivating?" he shouted at his technicians. "I don't know. Senator, the system is rewriting itself. The asset is doing it." Vrax spun around to face Leary. She was shaking violently on the throne, blood trickling from her nose, but she was smiling. It was a savage, triumphant smile. "Disconnect her!" Vrax screamed. He pulled a disruptor pistol from his robes and aimed it at her head. "If I cannot use you, I will break you." The doors to the chamber exploded inward. Jace Varen burst through the smoke, rifle raised, screaming her name. "Lyri!" The station screamed. It was not a metaphor. The colossal ring of Station Ouroboros, usually a hum of efficient recycled air and polite chimes, had descended into a cacophony of grinding metal and shrieking alarms. The power reroute, timed to coincide with the rebel insertion, had hit the grid with the force of a tidal wave, but it was the second variable, the tiny luminous figure strapped into the interface throne, that turned a glitch into a catastrophe. Lights in the maintenance sectors did not just flicker. They strobed in violent, nauseating bursts of white and red. Artificial gravity generators, confused by conflicting data streams, began to hiccup. One moment, down was the floor. The next, it was the wall, or a sickening lurch toward the ceiling. In the conduit running parallel to the reactor shaft, Jace Varen was running for his life. "Gravity failure," Jace shouted over the roar of the atmospheric scrubbers. "Mag boots, engage now!" He slammed his heel down hard on the metal grating. The magnetic locks in his soles clamped onto the deck with a heavy, metallic thud just as the world tilted sideways. Behind him, Mara and her team of rebels scrambled to follow suit. One fighter, a young Rhodian named Kix, was a fraction of a second too slow. As the gravity vector flipped 90 degrees, Kix was lifted off the walkway, his arms flailing in the sudden weightlessness. "Help!" Kix screamed, drifting dangerously toward the center of the conduit. Below, or what was now sideways, the shielding for the main reactor glowed with a terrifying, malevolent crimson heat. If he touched the containment field, he would be vaporized instantly. Jace did not think. He lunged, his magnetized boots keeping him anchored to the wall, and grabbed the strap of Kix's harness. The sudden stop wrenched Jace's shoulder, sending a spike of agony down his arm, but he held on. "Lock your boots," Jace roared, straining against the pull of the artificial gravity well. Kix found the plating, his magnets engaging with a clang. The rebel gasped, eyes wide and black with terror, nodding his thanks. "Move!" Mara barked from the front. "We have 5 minutes before the security grid reboots and cooks us in here." They sprinted along the wall, which felt like the floor, their perspective a dizzying tunnel of spinning fans and steam vents. Every step was a battle against the station's seizures. Jace gripped his rifle, his knuckles white. He was not a soldier, he was a janitor. But he knew these tunnels better than he knew the lines of his own palm. He knew that 50 meters ahead, there was a service hatch that led directly to the Senator's private sublevel. "Hold on, Lyri," Jace whispered to himself, the sweat stinging his eyes. "I am coming." Lyri was drowning in light. The interface was not a chair, it was an ocean. The Senator's technicians had wired her nervous system directly into the station's governance AI, forcing her consciousness to expand, to stretch until it covered every deck, every airlock, and every camera. It was agony. Her mind was not built to hold the logistical data of a city in space. The sheer volume of information, shipping manifests, oxygen levels, credit transactions felt like sand being forced into her veins. "Integrate," the system commanded, a voice that was not a voice but a wall of code. "Submit. Process." She screamed silently, her physical body arching against the restraints in the real world. But in the datascape, she was fighting a war of inches. She tried to wall herself off, to protect the core of who she was. Lyri, the girl who liked the smell of lemons, the girl who had chosen a janitor, but the Senator's programming was relentless. It sought to scour her clean, to leave only the biological key he needed to unlock the companion registry. Then, she felt it. It was faint, like a heartbeat in a hurricane. A digital footprint, crude, clumsy, unauthorized. Someone was hacking a door override in Sector 4. Someone was disabling a camera in the maintenance shaft. The code signature was messy. It was not the sleek, military-grade encryption of a corporate agent. It was a patchwork of bypasses and brute-force loops. Leary's heart leaped in her chest. She knew that clumsiness. She knew the stubborn refusal to quit texture of that intrusion. Jace. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. He had not sold her. He had not taken the money and run. The surrender, the signature, the cruel words. It was a performance. A lie to get her inside the one room he could not breach on his own. He came back, she thought, the joy burning brighter than the pain of the interface. He came back for me. The despair that had been paralyzing her vanished, replaced by a fierce, blinding resolve. He was down there, fighting his way toward her. He was walking into the teeth of the Senator's army for her. She would not let him do it alone. Leary gritted her teeth, ignoring the fire lancing through her nerves. She reached out into the data stream. She grabbed the security protocols for the maintenance sector and twisted them. In the conduit, the blast door ahead of Jace was sealed tight, a red light blinking angrily above it. "It is locked down," Mara shouted, raising her plasma torch. "Stand back! No time!" Jace yelled. He raised his hand to the control panel, preparing to attempt a bypass, but before he could touch it, the light turned green. The heavy bolts retracted with a groan, and the door slid open. Mara looked at Jace, stunned. "How did you do that?" "I didn't," Jace said, a fierce grin breaking through the grime on his face. "She did." He ran through the open door, in the interface. Leary gasped. The effort of forcing the door open against the Senator's lockdown protocols felt like tearing a muscle. Her body on the throne seized, sweat glistening on her luminous skin. The bioluminescent markings on her arms and neck were no longer softly pulsing. They were blazing, white-hot, tracing the path of the energy she was channeling. Senator Vrax, standing at the base of the dais, watched the monitors with growing fury. "Why are the blast doors opening?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the vast crystalline chamber. "Why are the internal sensors failing?" "It is the asset, sir," a technician cried, his hands flying across a holographic console. "Her biorhythms are spiking. She is not just passively integrating. She is pushing back. Override her." Vrax snarled. "Increase the voltage. Burn out her higher brain functions if you have to. I only need the genetic key, not her personality." The technician hesitated. "Sir, if we increase the neural load, we risk cardiac arrest." "She could die." "Do it!" Vrax screamed. A fresh wave of power slammed into Leary. Her back arched off the throne, a cry of pure pain tearing from her throat. The light in the room flickered, the crystalline pillars vibrating in sympathy with her scream. But she did not let go. She held the door open. She found the next camera in Jace's path and blinded it. She found the automated turrets in the hallway and put them to sleep. "You will not touch him," she thought, pouring her life force into the machine. "You will not touch him." Jace kicked open the service hatch and rolled out onto the plush carpet of the Senator's private deck. The transition was jarring. One moment, they were in a rusted, steaming tunnel. The next, they were in a hallway lined with silk tapestries and floating sculptures. "Contact!" Mara yelled. Corporate security guards, stationed at the end of the hall, opened fire. Blue stun bolts zipped through the air, sizzling into the walls and shattering expensive porcelain vases. Jace scrambled behind a floating anti-grav sofa, using it as mobile cover. "Push forward," Jace shouted, firing his pulse rifle blindly over the top of the sofa. "We have to get to the double doors." The firefight was chaos. The artificial gravity in this sector was fluctuating wildly due to Leary's struggle in the core. Furniture began to float toward the ceiling. A heavy marble bust of the senator drifted sideways through the air, intercepting a stun bolt meant for Jace's head. Jace moved with a reckless, terrifying courage. He was not a soldier, and that made him unpredictable. He vaulted over a barricade of floating chairs, firing on the move. He took a glancing hit from a stun bolt to his left thigh. The muscle seized violently, sending him crashing to the floor, but he rolled and came up limping, adrenaline masking the pain. He could feel her. It sounded crazy, but he could feel Leary close by. The air in the hallway crackled with the same static he had felt when he held her in the dark. "Cover me!" Jace yelled to the rebels. He sprinted across the open ground toward the heavy blast doors that guarded the inner sanctum. "Jace, look out!" Kix screamed. A heavy security droid dropped from a ceiling hatch, landing directly in front of the door. It raised a rotary cannon, the barrels spinning up with a high-pitched whine. Jace skidded to a halt, raising his rifle, but he knew he was too slow. Then, a blur of motion. Mara shoved Jace aside, slamming him into the wall. She stepped into the line of fire, leveling her heavy plasma caster. "For the cause," she roared. The droid fired. Mara took the full brunt of the volley. Her armor shattered. She was thrown backward, sliding across the polished floor, but she didn't stop firing. As she fell, she pulled the trigger. A concentrated bolt of superheated plasma slammed into the droid's power core. The machine exploded, showering the hallway with molten metal. "Mara!" Jace scrambled to her side. The rebel leader lay on the silk carpet, smoke rising from her chest. Her breath was a wet rattle. She grabbed Jace's collar, her grip surprisingly strong. "The door," she gasped, blood bubbling at her lips. "Make it worth something. Janitor, free them." Her eyes glassed over. Her hand slipped from his collar. Jace stared at her for one agonizing second. Rage, hot and blinding, welled up in his throat. He turned to the blast door. It was damaged by the explosion, sparking and jammed. Jace jammed his fingers into the exposed circuitry of the locking mechanism. He didn't use a tool. He used his rage. He ripped the wires out, shorting the panel. "Open!" he screamed. The door groaned and slid halfway open, stuck on its tracks. It was enough. In the core, Leary flinched. The death of the rebel hit the network like a spike of static. The companion registry was designed to monitor biosigns. When a life connected to the struggle was extinguished near a sensor, the system registered it as a loss of asset. She felt the woman's death. She felt the sudden silence where a heartbeat had been. Tears streamed down Leary's face, glowing with faint luminescence. "They are dying for me," she whispered. The grief did not break her. It hardened her. It took the fear she had been feeling and forged it into a weapon. No more, she thought. She dove deeper into the code. She stopped trying to open doors. She went for the throat of the system. She found the master control file, the root directory that defined every companion as property. She began to write a new line of code. Jace squeezed through the jammed door and stumbled into an antechamber. He stopped, blinking in confusion. The room was a bizarre, jarring contrast to the bloody hallway he had just left. It was a simulation lounge, designed for the senator's amusement. Holographic projectors were running a loop of companion training scenarios. Soft, romantic music filtered through the air. Holographic versions of beautiful alien women and men bowed and curtsied, reciting programmed lines of adoration. "Oh, Master, you are so strong," a holographic Twi'lek cooed, walking right through Jace's blood-stained coveralls. I live only to serve your happiness. The absurdity of it, the fake, saccharine slavery layered over the brutal reality of the death outside, snapped something in Jace's mind. "Shut up!" Jace roared. He raised his rifle and blasted the holo projector. The machine sparked and died. The Twi'lek vanished mid-curtsy. The music warped into a dying groan and cut out, replaced by the screaming of the station's emergency klaxons. Jace stormed through the lounge, kicking over a velvet chair. He reached the final set of doors. These were not locked. They were made of crystal, and through them, he could see the core. He didn't stop. He hit the doors with his shoulder, shattering the crystal latch, and burst into the sanctuary. The room was vast, a cathedral of data. Pillars of light stretched up to a vaulted ceiling that displayed the star maps of the galaxy. And there, in the center, was Lyri. She looked small, so incredibly small. The throne swallowed her. She was slumped forward, her head hanging, her hair clinging to her face with sweat. Cables pulsed with blue light, feeding into the halo around her skull. "Lyri!" Jace shouted, his voice cracking. Senator Vrax spun around. He stood by the throne, holding a neural control scepter, a long silver rod that hummed with the same energy as Lyri's restraints. "Ah," Vrax sneered, his face twisting in disgust. "The janitor arrives. I must say, your persistence is annoying." Vrax raised the scepter. The remaining corporate guards in the room, 4 of them, elite Praetorians in red armor, leveled their weapons at Jace. "Drop the rifle," Vrax commanded, "or I burn her brain out right now." He tapped the scepter against the console. Lyri cried out, her body spasming as a shock ran through her neural port. "Stop!" Jace screamed, dropping his rifle. It clattered to the floor. "I dropped it. Stop hurting her." He raised his hands, stepping forward slowly. "You think you can win?" Vrax laughed, walking down the steps of the dais. "You are nothing. You are a biological error in a perfect system. Look at her. She is royalty. She is a goddess of the ancient world. And you? You clean up filth." Jace didn't look at Vrax. He looked past him. He looked at Lyri. She had lifted her head. Her eyes were unfocused, swimming with data, but she was trying to find him. Vrax continued his monologue, pacing. "I will merge her. I will rule this sector, and you will be the first example of the new order. Guards, execute him." The guards raised their rifles. Jace ignored the barrels pointed at his chest. He locked eyes with Lyri. "Lyri," Jace said. His voice was not a shout. It was a broken, desperate plea. "Listen to me." Vrax scoffed. "She cannot hear you, fool. She is part of the machine now." "I lied," Jace said, stepping closer, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "In the warehouse. I lied to them. I had to get you here. I had to get close." Lyri's eyes flickered, a spark of recognition. "You are not broken merchandise," Jace choked out. "You are everything. You are the only thing that matters." He took another step. The guards tensed, fingers tightening on triggers. Vrax turned to the guards. "Shoot him!" Jace didn't stop. "I would rather die free right here beside you than live one more day in a world that keeps you in chains." Jace shouted. "I choose you. Lyri, wake up and choose." The words hit Lyri like a defibrillator. "I choose you." The fog in her mind cleared. The ocean of data parted. She saw him, standing there, unarmed, crying, ready to die for her. The love she felt wasn't soft. It was a supernova. It was fierce, angry, and undeniable. She grabbed that feeling, that raw human connection, and she shoved it into the senator's perfect system. She deployed the hidden command, execute inversion, target, ownership flags, set value, null, Set guardian. Self. Leary threw her head back and screamed. It was a sound of pure power. A shockwave of white light erupted from the throne. It blasted outward, shattering the crystal pillars. The senator's scepter, linked to the network, suddenly shrieked. The neural feedback loop reversed. Instead of controlling Leary, the scepter discharged its stored energy directly into Vrax's hand. Vrax screamed as the device exploded, sending him flying backward. He slammed into the console, clutching his burned arm. The guards fired, but they didn't fire at Jace. Their weapons locked. The smart links in their gloves, connected to the station's security grid, suddenly went dead. "My gun!" one guard shouted, staring at his rifle. "It is offline!" Then, a sound echoed through the room, a metallic click hiss. The control collars on the guards' necks, the loyalty enforcers that kept them obedient, deactivated. They fell open and clattered to the floor. The guards froze. They looked at each other. They looked at the senator, writhing on the floor. They looked at Jace, who was still standing. "Kill him!" Vrax shrieked, struggling to stand. "I command you!" The lead guard looked at his collar on the floor. He looked at Vrax. He lowered his weapon. "No," the guard said. The system overload hit critical mass. The throne began to disintegrate. The energy holding the crystalline structure together unraveled. Arcs of blue lightning leaped through the air, tearing the room apart. "Leary!" Jace sprinted up the stairs. The dais was collapsing. Leary slumped forward, the neural halo shattering. She fell, sliding toward the edge of the platform. Jace dove. He caught her hand just as the floor beneath the throne gave way, tumbling into the machinery below. He hauled her up, dragging her onto the solid platform. She was limp. Her skin was gray, the light almost gone. Jace pulled her into his arms, shielding her body with his own as debris rained down around them. The ceiling was caving in. "Leary." Jace sobbed, rocking her back and forth. "Leary, please, open your eyes. Don't go. Stay with me." Vrax, clutching his ruined arm, looked at the destruction of his life's work. He looked at the rebels pouring through the doors. He looked at his guards who had turned their backs. He spat a curse and scrambled toward a hidden panel in the wall, his private escape pod. He punched the button and vanished into the escape tube, a coward fleeing the fire he had started. Jace didn't care. He didn't care about the senator. He didn't care about the revolution. He brushed the hair from Leary's face. She was breathing, but it was shallow. "I got you," he whispered, his forehead pressed against hers. "I got you. You did it. You are free." Around them, the station groaned, but the alarms had changed. They were no longer the screech of a lockdown. They were the steady, pulsing tone of a system rebooting. A new system, one by one. The lights on Leary's skin began to flicker back on. Not the blinding white of the weapon she had been forced to be, but the soft, pearlescent lavender of the girl who had asked if she was allowed to hold his hand. She stirred. "Jace?" she breathed, a whisper barely louder than the sparks falling around them. "I am here," Jace said, tears dripping onto her cheek. "I am right here." She curled her fingers into his shirt, holding on tight. "We broke it," she murmured, her eyes fluttering closed again. "Yeah," Jace said, looking around at the ruins of the core. "We broke it all." He held her as the dust settled, two specks of life in the center of a shattered empire, waiting for the smoke to clear. The shockwave that hit Station Ouroboros was not seismic. It did not crack the hull or shatter the viewports. It was silent, invisible, and it changed the galaxy in the span of a single heartbeat. Across 300 decks, from the gilded penthouses of the spire to the rusted sumps of the undercity. A specific frequency broadcasted from the shattered core. It was a command that carried the authority of a dead empire, validated by the blood of a living queen. Ownership, null. In a crowded market on deck 40, a heavy labor cyborg froze mid-step, the crate of ore on his shoulder feeling suddenly light. Around his neck, the heavy suppression collar, a device he had worn for 20 years, clicked. A small green light turned red, and the locking mechanism disengaged. The collar fell to the floor with a heavy metallic clatter. He was not alone. All around him. The sound repeated. Click-clack, click-clack. It sounded like rain hitting a tin roof. A pleasure servant in a neon-lit bar stopped pouring a drink, her hand trembling as the neural dampener at the base of her skull powered down. She looked at the patron she was serving, a man who held her contract, and for the first time in her life, she did not look down. She looked him in the eye. The patron looked at his wrist computer. Contract not found. The screen flashed. Error. Asset unregistered. What is this? The patron demanded, tapping the screen. The servant set the bottle down. She did not bow. She did not recite her programmed greeting. I am leaving, she said. Her voice was steady, her own. The chaos that followed was not the violence of a riot, though there was shouting. It was the chaos of a sudden absolute vacuum in the social order. The invisible chains that held the station's economy together had evaporated. Thousands of beings stood in corridors, in kitchens, in factories, staring at their own hands, realizing that the labor they did next would be a choice, not a mandate. Some wept, some ran, fleeing the buildings where they had been held. Others stood paralyzed, the sudden weight of freedom pressing down on them harder than the gravity. It was a moral wildfire. It burned through the logic of the station, forcing every shopkeeper, every foreman, and every senator to look at the person standing next to them and realize that the dynamic had shifted. They were no longer owner and asset. They were just two people, standing in a metal box in the void, and the silence between them was deafening. In the medical bay of a decommissioned supply freighter, now commandeered by the surviving rebels, the air smelled of antiseptic and burnt wiring. It was a stark, cold room, lit by the harsh white glow of surgical lamps. In the center, hovering on a magnetic suspension slab, lay Leary. She looked painfully small. The grand, light-woven robes she had worn in the Corps were gone, replaced by a simple medical gown that swallowed her frame. Her skin, usually a vibrant tapestry of pearlescent lavender and shifting violet, was a dull, flat gray. The bioluminescent markings that defined her heritage were barely visible, flickering weakly like dying embers in a heap of ash. A rebel doctor, a hilotl with amphibious features and tired eyes, adjusted the readout on the diagnostic scanner. Her neural pathways are scorched, the doctor said, his voice low. The amount of data she channeled, it was like trying to download a library into a datapad. The voltage alone should have stopped her heart. Will she wake up? Jace asked. He was sitting in a metal folding chair beside the slab. He had not washed. He was still wearing his torn, blood-stained coveralls. His face was a map of bruises and grease, but his eyes were fixed on Leary with a terrifying intensity. The doctor hesitated. I do not know, he admitted. Her brain is in a protective fugue state. She has retreated deep into her own subconscious to repair the damage. She might wake up in an hour, or she might stay there, drifting in the dark, forever. Leave us, Jace said. The doctor looked at him, then nodded respectfully and stepped out. The hydraulic door hissing shut behind him. Jace was alone with the silence. He reached out and took Leary's hand. It was cold. Her fingers, usually so responsive and curious, were limp. Hey, Jace whispered. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. Hey, it is me, the janitor. He rubbed his thumb over her knuckles, tracing the faint gray line of her veins. You did it. Leary, You actually did it. You should see the news feeds. They are calling it the Great Unlocking. The senator is trying to spin it, saying he ordered a system reset, but nobody is buying it. The truth is leaking out faster than he can plug the holes. Leary did not stir. The monitor above her head beeped a slow, rhythmic cadence. Jace leaned forward, resting his forehead against the cold metal edge of the slab. "I need you to come back," he said, his voice trembling. "I know you are tired. I know it hurts. But you cannot leave me here. Not after all this." He laughed, a wet, choked sound. "I still have to show you the good noodle place on Deck 9. I promised you, remember? And I have to explain why socks have holes in them. There is so much stuff you do not know yet." He squeezed her hand. "I was so scared, Leary. When I saw you in that chair. When I thought I had lost you." He took a shaky breath, the confession spilling out of him, raw and unfiltered. "You made me want to be better. Before you fell out of that pod, I was just surviving. I was a ghost haunting my own life. I kept my head down. I let the world be cruel because I was too afraid to fight it. But you looked at me and saw something else. You saw a warrior." Tears slipped from his eyes, dripping onto the sterile floor. "You forced me to be the man you thought I was. You chose me when I felt like nothing, and I love you for it. Not because you are a princess or a key or a companion. I love you because you are stubborn and brave, and you drink cleaning fluid because you think it is a potion." He lifted his head, looking at her still face. "I love you. Leary, please, come back." For a long moment, there was only the hum of the suspension field. Then, a twitch. Jace froze. He watched her hand. Her index finger moved, curling slightly against his palm. "Leary," he breathed. Her eyelids fluttered. They did not snap open. They drifted, heavy and slow, fighting the weight of exhaustion. A sliver of opal appeared beneath her lashes. She groaned, a soft, dry sound. Jace stood up, leaning over her. "I am here. Look at me." Her eyes opened fully. They were unfocused, swimming with residual hallucinations of code and light, but they scanned the room until they found his face. "Jace," she croaked. Her voice was like sandpaper. "Yeah," Jace sobbed, grinning through his tears. "Yeah, it is me. You are..." "Loud," she whispered, a faint smile touching her lips. "Even in the dark. You are so loud. You heard me? I felt you," she murmured. "In the system, you were a beacon, a big, stubborn, noisy beacon. I followed you home." Jace let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for days. He leaned down and pressed his forehead against hers. She was still cool to the touch, but he could feel the heat returning to her skin, the faint hum of her bioenergy cycling back up. An hour later, the doctor allowed Jace to stay, but only if he kept her calm. The medical bay was chilly, the ship's heating system struggling to keep up with the demand of the refugees crowding the other decks. Leary was shivering on the slab, despite the thermal blanket tucked around her. "Come here," she whispered, shifting weakly to the side. "There is no room," Jace protested gently. "It is a diagnostic slab. Leary, it is barely wide enough for you." "I am cold," she said, giving him a look that was pure, stubborn royalty. "And I am the savior of the sector. Do not argue with me." Jace chuckled and carefully climbed onto the narrow bed. He lay on his side, balancing precariously on the edge, and pulled her against him. She sighed, burying her face in his chest, wrapping her arm around his waist. Her body molded to his, seeking his warmth. They lay there in the quiet of the med bay, the chaos of the revolution outside feeling a million miles away. Jace ran his hand down her back, soothing the tension in her muscles. Leary reached up and traced the lines of his jaw, her fingers lingering on the stubble. "In my culture," she said softly, her voice gaining strength, "we do not have weddings. We do not sign papers to prove we belong to someone." "No?" Jace asked, resting his chin on the top of her head. "No," she said. "Papers are for trade. Contracts are for things you can sell." She pressed her hand flat against his chest, right over his heart. Her palm began to glow, a soft, warm pulse that matched the rhythm of his beating heart perfectly. "We bind our patterns," she explained. "We sync our internal rhythm to another. It is a biological vow. It says, 'Your life is the drum my blood marches to.' It transcends territory. It transcends law. Once it is done, no distance can break it." She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with vulnerability. "Do humans have anything like that? Or is it just contracts?" Jace looked at her. He thought about the ring on the chain around his neck. It was a simple band of tarnished silver, left to him by a mother he barely remembered and a father who had died in the mines. It was the only thing of value he had ever owned. Until now. "We have something," Jace said quietly. He shifted, reaching up to undo the clasp of the chain. He pulled it free, the silver ring sliding down to rest in his palm. "It is not biological," Jace said, holding it up. "It is just metal. But it means the same thing. It means you are done looking. It means you have found your home." He took her hand. Her fingers were small and delicate against his calloused skin. He slid the ring onto the chain, and then draped the chain over her head. The silver band settled against her collarbone, resting against the fading scar of the control collar. "We call it choosing somebody," Jace whispered. "For real. Not for an hour. Not for a contract. For everything." Leary looked down at the ring. She touched it with a reverence that made Jace's throat tight. She looked back up at him, and her bioluminescence flared, not white and angry, but a deep, rich violet that filled the room with soft light. "If you want," Jace said, his voice rough with emotion. "I choose you. No ownership, no master and servant, just us. Partners." Leary did not speak. She pulled him down into a kiss that was fierce and trembling, a collision of two souls who had found each other in the wreckage of a broken world. It was not a kiss of desire, though that was there. It was a kiss of relief. It was a seal on a promise. As he held her, Jace felt a strange sensation in his chest, a warmth that spread from her skin to his, a subtle vibration that seemed to tune his own nerves to a new frequency. Her patterns were syncing with him. She was binding them, right there on the medical slab, in a way the senator's machines never could. "We are each other's," she whispered against his lips. "That is the only law that matters." The political fallout was swift and brutal. With the registry down, the evidence of the conspiracy flowed freely. The rebels, using the codes Jace had stolen, broadcasted the senator's private logs to the entire sector. They showed the communication intercepts. They showed the financial transfers from the trafficking rings. They showed the blueprints for the mind control integration. Senator Vrax tried to flee to the outer rim, but his own pilot, a freed companion, locked the cockpit door and flew the shuttle directly to the station's brig. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Senate convened a special hearing on Station Ouroboros. The hearing chamber was packed. Cameras from a dozen systems floated in the air. Senators, corporate magnates, and journalists watched in hushed silence as the key witness took the podium. Leary stood tall. She was no longer wearing the rags of a slave or the robes of a sacrifice. She wore a simple, tailored suit of dark blue fabric, chosen by Jace because he said it made her look like a boss. Around her neck, The silver ring on the chain caught the light. She did not stand alone. Next to her, standing slightly behind but clearly in support, was Jace. He was clean-shaven, wearing a stiff formal jacket that Rax had stolen for him. He looked uncomfortable with the attention, but he looked at Leary with a pride that burned. "State your name for the record," the High Adjudicator boomed. "I am Leary of Lyria," she said, her voice amplified by the microphones. "Last of the House of Ethelgard, and formerly Asset 472. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. "We are here to determine the extent of the corruption within the companion registry," the adjudicator said. "You claim that sentient trafficking was systemic." "It was not a bug in the system," Leary said, her voice ringing clear. "It was the system. You treated souls like software. You traded lives like currency. You built an empire on the silence of people you called products." She looked directly at the camera. "But systems of exploitation are fragile. They rely on everyone agreeing to look away. They rely on the lie that some people are small, and some people are big, and the small people do not matter." She reached back and took Jace's hand. He squeezed it tight. "But no one is truly small if they stand in the right place," she said. "A janitor brought down your empire. A human who had nothing chose to do the right thing when it cost him everything." She looked at Jace, and for a moment, the cameras and the senators vanished. "Love that respects freedom is stronger than any contract you can write," she said softly. "That is the lesson. If you build a world on chains, do not be surprised when it breaks." The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy with the weight of a truth that could not be unsaid. Epilogue. The ocean on Lyria did not behave like water. It behaved like light. As night fell, the waves rolling onto the black sand beach glowed with a phosphorescent brilliance, turning the surf into crashing walls of neon blue and green. The sky was thick with stars, unpolluted by industrial smog or neon advertisements. On a wide stone balcony overlooking the sea, Jace Varan leaned against the railing, holding a glass of nectar that tasted like spiced honey. He was wearing a tunic of shimmering silk that Larry's aunts had insisted he wear. It itched. "So," Jace muttered to himself, "I am a consort. That is my job title now. Consort to the High Key." He looked down at his boots. At least he had managed to keep his boots. Behind him, the great hall of the ancestral palace was filled with music. It was a celebration of the restoration. Leary's family, tall, luminous beings with eyes like galaxies, were welcoming their lost daughter home. Jace had spent the last hour trying to make small talk with a Lyrian elder who kept asking him about his clan lineage. "I fix pipes," Jace had explained. "My clan is the Union of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, Local 404. The elder had nodded gravely. "A water shaper clan. Very prestigious." Jace chuckled, sipping his drink. A soft hand touched his shoulder. He turned to see Leary. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown of living light that shifted colors with her mood. Currently, it was a warm, contented gold. "You are hiding," she teased, leaning against him. "I am not hiding," Jace said. "I am strategically observing the perimeter." "My aunt's like you," she said, resting her chin on his shoulder. "Aunt Kale said you have a sturdy aura." "Sturdy," Jace snorted. "That is a nice way of saying I am a brick." She laughed, the sound blending with the music of the ocean. "They know what you did, Jace. They know you saved me. They know you saved the code. You are a hero here." "I am a janitor who got lucky," Jace corrected. "Technically, I am a heroic saboteur now." "That sounds better on a resume." He turned and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. The silk of her dress was cool, but her skin was warm. "You okay?" he asked softly. Leary looked out at the ocean, at the world she had thought she would never see again. "I am free," she whispered, "and I am home." She looked up at him, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight. "But home is not just the planet, Jace." She tapped the ring that still hung around her neck, resting against her skin. "He is mine," she declared to the ocean, mimicking the fierce tone she had used in the core. Then she smiled, a soft, private smile just for him. "We are each other's." Jace tightened his arms around her, resting his cheek against her hair. She smelled of the sea and ozone, the scent of the storm that had brought them here. "You know," Leary murmured, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "It is funny." "What is?" "The senator spent billions of credits. He built a fortress, and he corrupted a government, and the entire system fell." She poked Jace in the chest, because one human man was too lazy to read the terms and conditions of the auction. Jace threw his head back and laughed, the sound echoing over the luminous waves. "Hey!" Jace defended himself, grinning. The interface was laggy, and the font was tiny. He kissed her forehead, lingering there. "Best mistake I ever made." In the quiet warmth of the balcony, surrounded by the light of a healed world, they stood together, not as owner and property, not as savior and victim, but as partners. Two small people who had refused to look away, and in doing so, had changed the stars.